I find myself perplexed. Perhaps the so-called love is merely a colorful butterfly, appearing beautiful yet forever out of reach. Should you truly attempt to clasp it tightly in your hand, it will struggle, and in its struggle, it will rub away all its colors, leaving only pallor behind. I seem to understand a bit now why I am so cautious. It's the fear of not being able to touch its soul while inadvertently erasing its beautiful hues. Chapter 1: Bearing Your Child. It was a rainy evening, with cold winds swirling fallen leaves through the city. Lu Yao and I stood under an umbrella at the entrance of the Maternity and Child Health Hospital. Amidst the bustling crowd, her face looked somewhat pale as she gazed at me. "Zhao Yang, I'm pregnant." I was taken aback and then retorted, "Go find the person who got you pregnant. Why did you call me out? I've only been with you this past year. Who else would I look for? And I've only slept with you this year, do you believe that? Zhao Yang, are you even a man?" We both knew this was just for fun. Don't pin this on me. If you want me to take responsibility, show me some proof. Who the hell wants to be a clueless father? Lu Yao was silent for a while, then said, "The child is already gone, there's no proof left." I was furious. Do you think I'm an idiot? You say you aborted the child, then, I raised my hand in exasperation, then tell me it's mine. Are you pretending to be naive, or am I just stupid? Lu Yao, we're adults. Can we handle this with some decency? Lu Yao bit her lip and looked at me for a long time before speaking. You refuse to take responsibility, right? Tomorrow, I'll go to your company. Damn it. Is that necessary? I snapped. Lu Yao bit her lip tightly, looking at me, but I thought she was a good actress. We met in a bar and had a one-night stand. A woman who frequents bars claiming she only slept with one man in a year. If I believed her, I'd be a fool. I didn't want to entangle with her anymore. I took out my wallet, pulled out all the 100 yuan bills, and handed them to her. You just want money, right? Take it and don't bother me again. Lu Yao said nothing, took the money, and walked into the hospital, as if she still had some unpaid bills. Watching her lonely figure in the rain, an indescribable feeling surged in my heart. Although I didn't believe the child was mine and I was annoyed by her, I felt her life must not be easy, otherwise, she wouldn't resort to extorting me. I was silent for a moment before calling out, "Wait." Lu Yao turned to look at me. I took out a bank card from my wallet and handed it to her. This card has some overdraft. You just had surgery, buy yourself something to nourish your body. Lu Yao didn't take it. No need. Seeing you willing to take responsibility was my goal. I sought you out because I didn't want to be taken advantage of and get pregnant without clarity. At the bar, I drank alone, waiting for my only true friend and colleague in this city, Fang Yuan. Since the first day I came to this bar, I had seen too many lonely women and empty men drinking all sorts of alcohol here, either silent or with eyes full of desire, searching for something called drunken dreams and death. In fact, when we abandon our daytime selves and let our souls get lost in this neon world, we are already living in drunken dreams and death. I don't remember when I started treating this place as my refuge. I like the women twisting their waists here, the swaying lights, the colorful drinks, the scent of perfume mixed with tobacco, and the drunken dreams and death. In those drunken dreams, I etched the chaos of the past into a tombstone. Lighting a cigarette, I peeled the thin film off the pack, placed it before my eyes, and watched the flickering lights, my body swaying along in the refracted light of the film. I seemed to see a decadent life of living day by day. I was lost in thought. Fang Yuan pulled the film from my hand, and my world suddenly became clear again. What's the rush? Fang Yuan put down his briefcase, took a cigarette from my pack, and lit it. Borrow some money. I got extorted. Got another girl pregnant? Fang Yuan asked nonchalantly. Again, my ass. I was really extorted this time. Who extorted you this time? Why ask so many questions? I lend you thousands each time. At least let me know who's taking my money. Lu Yao. I said angrily, lighting a cigarette. The model? Yeah, her. The industry is a mess. She said she only slept with me this year. Do you believe that? Fang Yuan, if this happened to you, would you believe it? I knocked on the table in frustration. This couldn't happen to me. Besides, she wouldn't trick you for a few thousand yuan last month. She did a promotional poster for our department store and earned over 10,000 yuan. I sneered, interrupting him. look at her usual expenses. Can 10,000 last her a month? She messed around with someone else, got into trouble, and thought of me as a cheap solution. I was an idiot to introduce her to our company. She made money, now she's screwing me over. Does she have any professional ethics? Fang Yuan ignored my anger and asked quietly, "Did you use protection when you slept with her?" I tried to recall but only remembered drinking heavily. I couldn't remember if I used protection and said, "I did." Which is why I said I was being extorted. Fang Yuan looked at me suspiciously for a long time before sighing, "Zhao Yang, we've been friends for nearly 10 years. Sometimes I want to advise you. I know your breakup with Jian Wei hit you hard, but it's been 2 years. There's no need to degrade yourself. Youth doesn't wait, find a girlfriend and settle down, okay?" When Jian Wei's name was mentioned again, I instinctively froze and said, "Don't worry about me. I'm doing fine. Not short on troubles, right?" Fang Yuan spent a long time trying to counsel me, but I responded impatiently. Finally, he left in a huff, muttering something about a hopeless case, forgetting entirely about lending me money. Fortunately, after frequenting this bar for 2 years and often bringing friends along, I was on good terms with the owner, who allowed me to put this drinking session on my tab. Walking out of the bar, I trudged along the rain-soaked streets, umbrella in hand, truly feeling what it meant to be utterly alone. After 2 years of struggling in this city, all I had gained was endless emptiness and solitude. To escape this toxic void, I had to wear a mask to hide my shame, living a life of reckless abandon. Yet no matter how I struggled on the edge of despair, she would never return. I walked alone, lost in my thoughts, for several blocks before returning to my old apartment complex. This was a dilapidated place, so rundown it didn't even have a property management office. In my first year here, the elderly women in the neighborhood told me it was built in the early 90s. Over the years, every building had become decrepit, yet they stood close together, as if afraid of being lonely. This gave the impression that the buildings had lives of their own, whispering to each other in the dead of night to dispel decades of solitude. With a cigarette in my mouth, I pulled out my keys and walked towards my building, the only one covered in ivy. Every summer, the south-facing wall turned a lush green. If these buildings had genders, this one would undoubtedly be a woman, a cold, aloof woman. She often evoked a sense of melancholy in people. To my surprise, a red Audi Q7 was parked below my rundown building. In my 2 years here, I had never seen a car worth over 50,000 yuan in this complex. Without thinking much of it, I whistled as I climbed the stairs to my apartment. Reaching the top floor, I was shocked to find my door ajar. I distinctly remembered locking it when I left. My first thought was that a thief had broken in, but then I remembered I hadn't paid my rent to Oldley, the landlord, in 2 months. He must have come to collect. Pushing open the door, I found Oldley sitting on the sofa with a woman I didn't recognize. A set of Audi Q7 keys lay on the coffee table, confirming that the car downstairs belonged to her. A question flashed through my mind: what kind of pull did Oldley, this shrewd city dweller, have to bring such an elegant, untouchable woman to this shabby apartment? I couldn't understand it at all. The new book is here, everyone. Light a cigarette, turn on your music player, and dive into my story. From now on, I will post a chapter every hour until I've shared 30,000 words. Stay tuned. Chapter 2: The Woman with the Q7. I looked at the woman again. She sat upright, with slightly curly hair cascading over her shoulders, fair skin, and a slender figure. The upward curve of her lips exuded a confident sharpness. In short, she was a stunning beauty. At first glance, it felt like there was nothing in the world that couldn't be forgiven. Oldley waved me over. "Zhao Yang, come here, I need to talk to you. It's about the rent, right? I'll pay you all I owe next month when I get my salary. How's that?" I said with a forced smile, knowing I had delayed paying rent for too long. "It's about the house. This house has been sold to this lady." "You sold the house? Who in their right mind would buy this dilapidated place that can't withstand a minor quake?" I exclaimed, looking at the woman. Faced with the threat of eviction, I couldn't care less about her elegance and beauty. I was furious. Oldley awkwardly glanced at the frowning woman, then turned back to me. "You need to move out tonight. I won't charge you for the past few months' rent." Oldley, the older you get, the more spineless you become. Even if you wanted to sell the house, you should have at least given me a heads up. Where am I supposed to find a new place in this rain? "Just stay in a hotel for now," Oldley suggested, indifferent to my plight. You lost the property rights, so don't talk to me. I snapped at Oldley before turning to the woman. The house is yours now. Can I continue renting from you? She shook her head. I bought it to live in myself. I have no intention of renting it out. I lost my composure. Miss, are you serious? You drive a car worth over £1,000,000 and come to live in this dump? Are you deliberately trying to make my life difficult? The woman ignored my anger and calmly said, You have 1 hour to move out. Before she could finish, I interrupted, I won't move. Have you ever heard of evicting someone without prior notice? I then sat next to her on the sofa, causing her to instinctively shift away. I lit a cigarette, feeling a wave of sadness wash over me as I scanned the familiar room. For the past 2 years, I had lived here, enduring the hardest times of my life. This apartment was a witness to my struggles. I had wept to the clock in the living room and poured my heart out to the old floor lamp in the bedroom. Every object here felt like a close friend who had shared my hardships. Leaving this place meant abandoning the anchor that had kept me going. As smoke billowed from my mouth, the woman stood up, evidently repelled by it, and moved to the other side of the room. I felt even more dejected, as if every misfortune had conspired to strike me today. After a moment, Oldley said, I have some matters to attend to at home. You two can discuss the house situation yourselves. Without waiting for a reply, he fled like someone discarding a hot potato, leaving only me and the woman in the room. Outside, the wind and rain raged even more fiercely, making me even more reluctant to move out. I decided to sit tight and outlast this woman. After all, I had nothing but time. I tried to engage her in conversation. Miss, may I know your name? She responded without a smile, Does it matter? Of course it does. I need to know which deity has made me homeless on this rainy night. She ignored my sarcasm and calmly replied, You have 40 minutes left. If you don't move out by then, I'll call the police. Just as I was about to explode, my phone rang. He shot her a glare before pulling my phone from my pocket. It was Lu Yao calling, another source of my frustration. I answered irritably, What now? Didn't I give you money already? Lu Yao hesitated before saying, Zhao Yang, tomorrow is the weekend. Can you come with me to the hospital for a follow-up check? Is the child in your belly mine? Can't you ask a friend to accompany you? Do you think I'm just sitting around doing nothing? I snapped, hoping to dissuade her from her unrealistic request. I only have you in this city, she replied quietly. Lu Yao, you're mistaken. We are bedmates, not friends. Do you understand what a bedmate is? Lu Yao ignored my outburst, her voice trembling as she said, I'm really scared being alone. If you don't come, I'll just let it be and won't go for the follow-up. I tried to stay patient. You went by yourself today, didn't you? Tomorrow should be even easier. It was because I went alone today that I realized how terrifying it is. Lu Yao's persistence was driving me insane. Frustrated, I swore. Asterisk. Go ahead and swear. If only I'd kept the baby, I would have raised it and told him that his father was a beast. She hung up, leaving the beeping tone of the disconnected call. Damn it! I lit another cigarette and smacked my forehead repeatedly. In the past 2 years, I had never met a more troublesome casual partner than Lu Yao. Despite her firm declarations, I was equally certain the baby wasn't mine. She claimed I was her only friend in this city, but just last week, she had posted a picture on Weibo of herself partying at a bar with a group of people. Scumbag! I lifted my head to see the woman staring at me with intense disgust. With only the two of us in the room, it was clear she was talking to me. You overheard my call? I asked emotionlessly, not minding that she called me a scumbag, because I couldn't even decide if I was one myself. You now have 30 minutes left, she said, her tone colder than before. This troublesome, cold rainy night was becoming unbearable. After giving all my cash to Lu Yao, I was penniless. Where could I go now? The world was vast, yet I had no place to call my own. After a moment of silence, I said, Miss, look outside. It's pouring in late. Moving out tonight is impossible. She glanced out the window, then softened slightly. When will you move? Tomorrow. What time? Before 1 p.m., I replied, switching to a gentler tone because I would soon need her favor. She nodded. Fine, but be punctual. Move your things out by tomorrow. I remained seated. After a moment, I leaned towards her and awkwardly asked, "Miss, could you lend me some money?" She looked surprised but firmly said, "I'm not obligated to lend you money." "No loan, huh? Then don't expect me to leave tonight. I have no money and can't sleep under a bridge," I said, lying back on the sofa. "And don't think about calling the police. This whole situation is unfair. You and Old Lee should have informed me in advance to give me time to prepare." She looked at me as if I were a plague but seemed eager to end the ordeal. "Surprisingly," she said, "I don't have any cash." I stared at her. A statement like that signified a high-status lifestyle. Wealthy people seldom carry cash since their expenses far exceed what can fit in a wallet. "Miss, this is fate. I also dislike carrying cash," I shamelessly admitted. My wallet rarely held any cash. She ignored my comment. I continued, "How about this, lend me your card. I'll withdraw 1,000 yuan and return it tomorrow when I move out. Or, we can go to the ATM 200 meters from here together if you're worried." She interrupted, pulling a bank card from her wallet. "The password is 6 zeros. Get your things done by 1 p.m. tomorrow." I took the card, saying, "No problem." It didn't surprise me that she trusted me with her card. Old Lee knew all about me, my phone number, workplace, and connections. Besides, there might not be much money on this card. She sat quietly on the sofa as I observed her again. In my 20-odd years, I had never seen such a beautiful woman. She had a unique aura other women lacked. However, it was unfortunate that we didn't seem to get along well. As I was about to leave, I half-joked, half-seriously said, "Miss, how about considering cohabiting with me? I can cook and give massages. After a long day at work, I can provide you with full-service care to ensure your comfort." "Get out," she finally snapped, hurling a pillow at me with pinpoint accuracy. Chapter 3, You Are My Only Love. With an umbrella in hand, I sorrowfully left the small abode that had sheltered me for 2 years. My heart was heavy, and my request to live with that woman was neither frivolous nor an attempt to take advantage at this moment. I felt like a homeless child, stripped of warmth, with no one knowing I was on the verge of tears. Yet, one must learn to face reality, mustn't they? When Old Lee sold the house, my departure became inevitable. I found an ATM nearby and withdrew 1,000 yuan as agreed, then checked the account information. Only then did I learn that the excessively beautiful woman's name was Mi Kai. I loved her name. Mi symbolized sustenance, Kai denoted splendor. If life had both, it would undoubtedly be blissful. But I had neither. My life was now a mere existence of hunger and monochrome. Thus, Mi Kai's appearance seemed more like a mockery, highlighting my destitution and desolation. At the corner of the long street, there was a hotel where I stayed. The fierce wind and rain kept me awake until dawn. I fell into a daze and woke up almost at noon. Checking my phone, I found over a dozen missed calls, all from Lu Yao. She was relentless. Seeing I hadn't answered, she sent a message, "I should have kept the baby and used the so-called child to torment you forever." I found it amusing. If she wasn't afraid of being an unwed single mother, did she think I'd fear being a nominal father? Her complaints didn't weigh on me at all. After a quick wash, I hurried to the hospital. Perhaps it was a remnant of kindness, or maybe sympathy for our brief companionship, I couldn't quite discern. Often, people don't fully understand themselves. At the women's hospital, I saw Lu Yao waiting at the entrance with an umbrella. She spotted me immediately, her anxious expression easing a bit as she walked toward me. Anger welled up inside me, but thinking of her lying on the operating table facing the cold surgical knife, I held back. Lu Yao, with a grave look, clung to my arm and glanced at her abdomen, as if showing that she loved me while I didn't cherish her. I shook her off, finally annoyed. "Damn it. Tell me honestly, whose child is it?" "It's yours, Zhao Yang." "Do you believe I'll strangle you?" I glared at her. "Beast, go ahead. If you had strangled me yesterday, it'd be double homicide. Today you'd be on the news, everyone in the country would know you." Lu Yao squinted at me, sticking closer. "Enough already. We slept together 2 months ago. How long have you been pregnant? Show me the scans." Ignoring my doubts, she softened, holding my arm tightly with a deep sigh. "Zhao Yang, if I hadn't had the surgery and let the baby call you dad, wouldn't that have been wonderful?" Suppressing my anger, I pushed her aside. "Stop playing games, alright? Go for your follow-up, and once you leave this hospital, consider me dead. Don't bother me again. Lu Yao lowered her head. After a moment, she replied, "Fine, I won't bother you anymore." Lu Yao was getting in 4 in the ward while I, like a family member, sat beside her silently. Feeling a bit stifled, the doctor pulled me aside, saying, "Young man, your girlfriend is quite weak, with mild anemia. Post-abortion care is crucial, or it might affect her in the future. I'll prescribe some medications and supplements for her. You can get them from the pharmacy on the 2nd floor." I nodded, thinking the 1,000 yuan from Mikai's card should suffice. With the prescription in hand, I went to the pharmacy. After 5 minutes, the staff handed me a bag full of medications and supplements, then said, 3,016 yuan in total. Will you pay by card or cash? I was taken aback and swore, what kind of miracle drugs cost over 3,000? Are you trying to scam me? The staff, unfazed, pointed to a man who had just bought 8,000 yuan worth of supplements. See, that guy just spent 8,000 yuan. If you can't afford it, don't let your girlfriend get pregnant. Spending so much, what an idiot. I cursed at the man's retreating figure. Remembering Lu Yao's frail post-abortion state, I held back my anger and handed over Mikai's card. Get me a discount, or at least round it down by 16 yuan. The staff took the card, rolled her eyes, and said, "Ever seen a hospital that gives discounts?" Leaving the pharmacy with the medications, my heart ached. This fling was turning out to be quite costly. Supporting a weak Lu Yao out of the hospital, we were met with relentless rain, the air heavy and oppressive. Lu Yao, leaning against me, suddenly asked, "Zhao Yang, a film crew invited me to Hengdian next month. Should I go? Is it reliable?" I asked gently, not wanting to upset her, though I had no interest in her acting career. "I've already tried on costumes. The director and producer are satisfied and think I fit the role." "Go for it then. Models like you are always trying to break into acting. If it's an opportunity, grab it. By the way, these are the post-op supplements. Take them as prescribed. I'll text you the instructions." I handed her the bag. Lu Yao didn't take the bag immediately but gazed at me for a long time. "I'm only a model temporarily. I actually graduated from the Shanghai Theatre Academy." "No wonder you're so good at playing your part. I didn't realize you were a top student from the academy." I half joked, half sarcastically. Ignoring my mockery, she asked, "Zhao Yang, do you think I'm beautiful? If you weren't beautiful, would I have slept with you?" I retorted. She was indeed a beauty, with bright eyes, red lips, and a touch of sensual charm. Lu Yao nodded. "Zhao Yang, forget about Jianwei. When I become a star, I'll love only you." With that, she took the bag and left like the wind. It took me a while to snap out of it. A cold wind blew, reminding me of my promise to help Mikai move by 1 o'clock. It was already 1:30. I hailed a taxi and headed to my old place, worrying about the 3,016 yuan I spent on Mikai's card. I had promised to use only 1,000 yuan. Now I owed her 4016 yuan. How would I repay her? Thinking of Mikai's excessively beautiful yet stoic face, I felt utterly lost. Chapter 4, The Bewitched Weekend. By the time I returned to my old apartment, it was nearly 2 p.m. I paid the fare and made my way to my building, not particularly rushed since it was the weekend. My main concern was the 4,016 yuan I owed her. Even if I sold myself, I couldn't come up with that much money. Upon reaching my building, I was stunned and furious. My belongings had been unceremoniously dumped in the hallway, with some items drenched by the rain, including a pair of black leather shoes given to me long ago by Jianwei. I discarded my umbrella and fumbled for my keys, sprinting up the stairs in a rage. I unlocked the door, kicked it open, and bellowed, "You wretched woman, come out here." After shouting 3 times with no response, I kicked open the door to her room, only to find it empty. The room was meticulously clean, which only fueled my anger further. I threw her bedding to the floor, even appending the mattress in a fit of rage. After my hysterical outburst, I stood in her room, lighting a cigarette to calm down. Mikai appeared at the doorway, carrying a mop and a shopping bag filled with household items. She must have been to the store. She glared at me. I grabbed her by the collar, dragging her into the room with such force that she dropped the bag and mop, scattering items everywhere. The once pristine room was now in chaos. I dragged her to the window, forcing her to look at my rain-soaked belongings. "What's wrong with you? Why did you throw my things outside? Mikai freed herself, replying coldly, You didn't show up on time, so I had someone move them out. Is there a problem? I got delayed, so what if I'm late? An agreement is an agreement, she retorted, her eyes unwavering. You're impossible. I was seething, raising my hand as if to hit her. I expected her to flinch or close her eyes, but she stood her ground, looking at me with unblinking eyes. I lowered my hand and sneered, Bring my things back inside, and I'll pretend this never happened. I won't, she said, her beautiful eyes glistening with unshed tears. Fine, have it your way, I muttered, and with a sense of vindictive pleasure, I threw her bedding and blankets out the window. The sight of the bedding falling in the rain, looking so forlorn and helpless, gave me a pang of regret. I shouldn't have acted so impulsively, shouldn't have treated this stubborn woman so harshly. Perhaps it was the sight of those black shoes in the rain that triggered me, reminding me of my lost love with Jinwei. When the last of the blankets hit the ground, I felt a twinge of guilt. I turned to Mikai, Now we're even. Tears streamed down her pale cheeks as she bit her lip, glaring at me. Looking at the mess I had made, I felt a pang of remorse but maintained my stern demeanor. I know you despise me, think I'm worthless. Yes, I'm poor and aimless, but that doesn't give you the right to disrespect me and my belongings. I'm being a gentleman today, throwing only your bedding. Next time, I'll throw you out too. I placed her bank card on the table. I withdrew 4016 yuan. I don't have the money to repay you now, but I will find a way to return it. Mikai's eyes filled with tears. You're all liars, every single one of you. Her words cut deep, leaving me speechless. After a moment, I said, I'm leaving. I will repay you, even if it's late. I keep my promises. Mikai didn't respond, her eyes still filled with resentment. I left, unsure if she was still crying, but certain she was suffering in the chaos I had created. She had called me a scoundrel, and perhaps she was right. I acted impulsively, like a beast unable to control its emotions, living recklessly. I hailed a taxi and moved my belongings to a nearby sheltered pavilion, not knowing where to go next. I had little money left, not enough to rent a place, and staying in a hotel was not a long-term solution. My only friend, Fong Yuan, was upset with me and refused to answer my calls. It felt like the world had abandoned me. I lit a cigarette, sitting on a stone bench in the pavilion, watching the traffic go by in a daze. My life shouldn't be like this, but for the past 2 years, I had lived in isolation, like the silent buildings in this city, all because of that woman. I knew I would never hold her hand again, yet I couldn't let go of her memory. A cold wind made me shiver. I found a scarf in my bag and wrapped it around my neck, shielding myself from the relentless chill. For the next hour, I sat in the pavilion, alternating between smoking and staring blankly at the world around me. As dusk approached, I felt a desperate need for rescue. A sudden phone call startled me. It was from my father. My father, a man of stern disposition, worked as a deputy in a small state-owned enterprise for 15 years. Despite his honest nature, he was dubbed Deputy Bored for his unwavering integrity. At 17, I started calling him Bored Dad, though he thought I was saying my dad. I answered the call, hearing his familiar, emotionless voice. Zhao Yang, I'm arriving in Suzhou. I have a trade show tomorrow. I'll stay at your place tonight. Panic set in. This cursed weekend had just worsened. My father couldn't know I was penniless and homeless. Despite his stern nature, he had a temper. Thinking quickly, I said, Dad, can you find a hotel near the station? I'm having dinner with colleagues and might be late. I can wait. Isn't your key under the doormat? Too many thieves lately, I didn't leave it there. I'll wait. Don't stay out too late. You must be tired from the journey. A hotel would be more comfortable. It's rush hour, and the bus will be crowded. My father was persistent. Your mother knitted you a sweater. I'll bring it to you. Hearing the call disconnect, I felt desperate. I shouldered my bags and rushed to the road, hailing a taxi. Tonight, I had to stay in that apartment, whether Mikai liked it or not. If my father saw my current state, he'd be furious. Chapter 5, For now, let it be. In the midst of a storm, I took a taxi back to the dilapidated neighborhood where I had lived for 2 years. Stepping out of the cab, I instinctively looked around to see if Mikai's Audi Q7 was parked downstairs. Fortunately, the car wasn't there, and even more fortunately, I still had the key to the apartment. I optimistically thought that if she didn't come back tonight, everything would be fine, and this minor crisis would be averted. I hurried back to the apartment, quickly put my luggage in place, and made the bed. Then, holding an umbrella, I waited at the bus stop for my father's arrival. After about 15 minutes, a bus from the long-distance terminal arrived. I craned my neck and spotted my father, briefcase in hand, descending from the bus. I waved and called out, "Dad, over here." He came over, somewhat surprised, and asked, "Weren't you having dinner with your colleagues?" "Dinner is trivial. Your visit is significant." "I know my priorities," I said, taking his briefcase from his hand. He fell silent, walking with me toward the apartment complex. I grumbled, "Dad, you're on a business trip at the company's expense. Next time, just take a taxi. It's reimbursable." "Even public funds are money, every bit saved counts," he replied sternly. "Our government has billions in foreign reserves stashed in the US. They won't miss your taxi fare." He said nothing more, clearly unwilling to engage in a debate over values. He had always been like this, firm in his beliefs, never explaining, living in his own independent world where he had remained an assistant director for 15 years. Back in the apartment, my father took a stainless steel lunchbox from another bag and said, "These are wild carp I caught last week. Your mom cooked them for you. You can heat them up or eat them cold. Let's have them tonight." He looked at me quizzically. "Didn't you already eat with your colleagues?" "Well, since you're here, I came back early." I quickly changed the subject. "By the way, did you bring Mom's homemade rice wine?" He nodded and pulled out a bottle originally used for orange juice, filled with my favorite rice wine. We each poured a glass, ate the cooked fish and peanuts, and waited for the rice porridge in the electric cooker, chatting intermittently. I was a bit on edge, fearing Mikai's sudden return. It wouldn't matter if she was startled, but if my father found out the truth, I'd be in serious trouble. I had just downed a glass of rice wine when footsteps echoed outside, followed by the sound of a key in the lock. Panic set in. I glanced at my father and then at the door, now perilously close. The door opened, and there she was, Mikai, frozen in surprise. My father, however, seemed unfazed, likely assuming she was a roommate or girlfriend. Before Mikai could speak, I quickly took her arm and asked with feigned concern, "Have you been drinking? Let me help you inside." "No need to thank me, it's what roommates do." Despite my polite words, I covered her mouth from a vantage point my father couldn't see and hurriedly pushed her into her room. "Let go of me, you scum." Mikai struggled, her words muffled quiet. I hissed. Mikai fumbled for her phone, clearly intending to call the police. My actions could indeed be considered trespassing. I snatched the phone from her, pinned her down on the bed to stop her struggling, indifferent to how vulgar the position might seem. "Stop yelling. If my dad hears, I'm dead," I whispered urgently. Ignoring me, Mikai's eyes filled with fear as she instinctively grabbed my hair, making me wince in pain. "Ease up, or you'll rip my hair out." "Scum," she muttered through my hand. "Yes, I'm a scum, but in my father's eyes, I'm not. He has high blood pressure. If he finds out I'm broke and homeless, he'll be devastated. Please, just tolerate this for one night. He's here on a business trip and will leave tomorrow morning. I swear I won't bother you again." Mikai finally stopped struggling and let go of my hair, but her eyes still burned with hatred. I cautiously removed my hand from her mouth. This time, she remained silent, relieved. I was about to get up when she twisted and shoved me off the bed, making me crash to the floor. "Jia Yang, what are you doing in there?" my father asked, hearing the commotion. "Just bumped into the cabinet," I replied. He didn't press further. Mikai, her face now a mix of anger and mockery, looked at me. "Don't say a word. My dad really has high blood pressure, he can't take any shocks. Stay in your room and don't come out." Mikai neither agreed nor disagreed. I made a pleading gesture. She remained silent, so I took it as acquiescence and left the room. In the living room, my father had already served 3 bowls of porridge from the kitchen. "Jia Yang, take a bowl to that young lady. After drinking, she should eat something, she shouldn't go hungry. Let her rest." Just then, Mikai emerged from her room with her handbag. Given my past wrongdoings, she would be justified in exposing me to my father right now. As I anxiously watched, she walked straight to the door, apparently planning to leave the apartment to me for the night. Just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, my usually taciturn father spoke to Mikai. "Young lady, I prepared a bowl of porridge for you. Please have it while it's hot. I desperately wished for her to leave and gestured at her to do so, but she looked at me, then nodded at my father. Thank you, uncle. Moments ago, we were at each other's throats. Now, by some strange twist of fate, we sat at the same table eating porridge. I felt like a criminal, silent and wary, constantly watching Mikai out of the corner of my eye, unsure of her intentions. Yet, she seemed uninterested in revealing my secrets, sipping her porridge quietly. My father, always reticent, finished his porridge first and stood up, lifting his briefcase. Since someone lives here, I'll stay at a hotel. I glanced at Mikai and then said to my father, Dad, you don't have to leave. You can sleep in my room. My snoring has gotten worse lately. You have to work tomorrow, I don't want to disturb your sleep. He shook his head, handing me a sweater from his bag. Your mother knitted this for you. I looked at it, puzzled. Why are there two sweaters? One is for your future girlfriend. Hand-knit sweaters are warm and durable. I sighed inwardly, recognizing another subtle reminder from my parents to find a girlfriend soon. Glancing at Mikai, I teased, it's cold. I'll give you a sweater later. Mikai glared at me but held back in front of my father, leaving me with a sense of quiet triumph. As my father prepared to leave, he took 3,000 yuan from his wallet and handed it to me. Take this. I laughed it off, why would I need money? I'm not short on cash. He forced the money into my hand. I know you too well. Plan your expenses. Don't forget to pay the utility bills, he said, glancing at the overdue notice on the floor. A pang of guilt hit me. I really wasn't a son who could make his parents proud. I pushed the money back to him. I really don't need it. Mom's health isn't great. Use this to buy her some supplements. I'll get paid next week. Without further argument, he placed the money on the table, looked at Mikai, and then left the apartment. I escorted my father downstairs. For a while, he remained silent, then remarked, that young lady seems nice and quite attractive. I glanced at the Q7 parked nearby and said, Dad, stop fantasizing. She's not my type. See that car? It's hers. He looked at the red Q7, clearly puzzled by why Mikai, driving such a car, would live in such a rundown place. He eventually chose his usual silence. He was resigned to my poor situation. Whether we admit it or not, we now live in a world where love needs money as proof. So, I urged him to stop dreaming, just as I had stopped myself. That night, my father left me with one last piece of advice, work hard. Before he disappeared into the rain, holding an umbrella watching his aging figure fade into the downpour, I understood his hopes. He wanted me to work hard, to marry well, to give him a grandchild. But, Father, I am trapped in my struggles, burdened by reality's weight. For now, let these aspirations wait. Is that all right? Chapter 6, They're Getting Married. Returning home, I saw that Mikai had nearly finished her bowl of porridge. Mine was still steaming. I took out 2 salted duck eggs from the bag my father left and handed one to Mikai. Try this, I said. I'm almost done, she replied, speaking to me normally for the first time in the 2 days we've known each other. I smiled. Have another bowl. White rice porridge won't make you gain weight. Ignoring my suggestion, Mikai said, Your father has left. You can move out too. I glanced at the storm outside and pleaded, Let's postpone it to tomorrow. Can I stay one more night? No, she replied firmly. I slammed my chopsticks on the table, irritated. What's your problem? Don't you know the saying, one should be gracious after taking someone's food? Spit out the porridge you just ate, and I'll move immediately. Mikai looked at me with wide eyes, speechless at my sudden outburst. Softening my tone, I said, Come on, I've had a long day. I'm exhausted. Please, just let me stay tonight. Scoundrel. Who's your sister? Miss. Miss, is that better? I quickly corrected myself. I promise I'll move out after work tomorrow. After a moment, Mikai relented. Remember what you said. Of course, I'll move tomorrow. Mikai shot me a disapproving look, then went to the rice cooker to get herself another small bowl of porridge. Aren't you done eating? I asked. She glared at me. Since I've already eaten some, one more bowl won't hurt. I sighed, shaking my head. People can be so self-indulgent. Despite the teasing, I peeled the salted duck egg and handed it to Mikai. She accepted it, and we continued eating in an oddly quiet atmosphere. After dinner, I handed Mikai 3,000 yuan my father left. Here's 3,000 yuan for now. I'll pay you the rest next week when I get my salary. Will you have enough to rent a place if you give me this? You can pay me back all at once later. You're considering my situation? I'm not avoiding paying you back, I said, putting the money back into my wallet. Just move out quickly. That's all I care about. She took another sip of porridge, clearly enjoying it. Indeed, my father's porridge had a homely touch to it. I'm not some plague. Do you really have to despise me so much? I lamented. With your conduct, do you expect me to like you? I smiled and let the matter drop. Perhaps my behavior was questionable, or maybe she misunderstood me. Either way, it didn't matter. After tomorrow, our paths would diverge. I finished my porridge and looked at Mikai. She wore a white chiffon blouse and black and white checkered pants, her wavy mid-length hair enhancing her delicate appearance. I took out the knitted sweater my father left and pretended to measure it against her. It's getting cold. Don't you think this sweater suits you? Mikai frowned. Are you trying to make me indebted to you? Really, it suits you. If you let me continue renting this place, I don't mind giving it to you. My father said my mother knitted it herself. It's warm and perfect for winter. I don't want it. I smiled and handed her the sweater. I'm joking. You can have it whether or not I stay. I don't plan on dating anyone soon. It's a waste to keep such a nice sweater with me. Consider it an apology for my rudeness yesterday. I appeared genuinely sincere. Mikai hesitated but accepted the sweater. Fine, I accept your apology. And be kinder to your father. Stop lying to him and causing him worry. Is there a connection between accepting my apology and being nice to my father? I asked, puzzled. You're truly despicable, she exclaimed, stuffing the sweater into her bag and leaving. Left alone, I couldn't understand Mikai's sudden anger. After pondering for a long time, I realized she might have accepted my apology and let me stay out of sympathy for my father. She still found me insufferable, viewing me as someone who had wronged women, deceived my father, and treated her rudely. To her, I was nothing but a scoundrel. That night, Mikai didn't stay in the apartment. I wondered if she had other places to stay in the city. Why did she insist on living here? Unable to figure it out, I decided to stop thinking about it. The world is full of strange people and events. This wasn't particularly unusual, so there was no need to dwell on it. I considered it a form of performance art by the wealthy. Often, I preferred living in ignorance because the truth could bring pain. Achieving something could lead to loss, so not knowing the truth meant no pain, and not attaining meant no loss. The next day at the company, after our weekly planning meeting, I walked out with Fang Yuan, another colleague, Zhao Li, following behind. I lit a cigarette and called Zhao Li over. Come here, Zhao Li. He looked at me warily. What? I heard you like outdoor activities? Yes, I do. I smiled. I have a set of professional outdoor gear, barely used. I'll sell it to you cheap. Why did you buy outdoor gear if you don't like it? Zhao Li asked, puzzled. Because I didn't know I wouldn't like it. It's almost new, top-notch. Arc'teryx, a bargain at 2,000 yuan. I put my arm around Zhao Li's shoulder. Really? Zhao Li asked, excited. Of course. Give me the money now, and I'll have Fang Yuan bring it to you tomorrow. It's been at his place. Zhao Li counted 2,000 yuan and handed it to me. Remember to bring it tomorrow. I need it for rock climbing next weekend. Talk to Fang Yuan yourself, I said, pocketing the money. Zhao Li turned to Fang Yuan, who seemed distracted. Fang Yuan, remember to bring the outdoor gear tomorrow. Fang Yuan looked confused. What outdoor gear? Zhao Yang's Arc'teryx set. He sold it to me, Zhao Li explained patiently. I took a deep drag on my cigarette and headed to the restroom. Behind me, Fang Yuan cursed, damn it, that's mine. I heard Fang Yuan grudgingly tell Zhao Li, fine, I'll bring it tomorrow. After smoking in the restroom, I returned to the office. Fang Yuan was busy typing on his keyboard, a cup of coffee on his desk, wearing anti-radiation glasses. While waiting for my computer to start, I played with my lighter and asked, "Still working on the Gucci project for our mall?" Fong Yuan sighed. "Yes, I've been at it for a week. The marketing department is waiting for our plan to negotiate with Gucci's representatives." I nodded, not pressing further. Fong Yuan was a workaholic. While I always took things easy, this difference resulted in him being a team leader in 2 years, while I remained at the bottom. Suddenly, Fong Yuan stopped typing and stared at me intently. "What's up?" I asked, puzzled by his look. Fong Yuan finally spoke. "You seemed down the past few days, so I didn't mention it. Yan Yan and I are getting married next week." "Finally getting married, huh?" I sighed, feeling a sharp pang of heartache. Fong Yuan met Yan Yan through my ex-girlfriend, Jianwei. Yan Yan was Jianwei's best friend, and I was close to Fong Yuan. After Jianwei and I started dating, we introduced them, and they fell in love. During college, the four of us often hung out, forging a deep friendship. We even joked about getting married together after graduation. Fong Yuan and Yan Yan's wedding was a joyous event, but it painfully highlighted my own loneliness. I had failed to sustain my relationship with Jianwei. Sometimes, pain comes from comparison. But at this moment, all I could do was feel envy and offer my congratulations to Fong Yuan and Yan Yan. Past memories would turn to dust, but the wind couldn't disperse them, leaving my heart covered in a layer of gray. I smiled at Fong Yuan. "Where's my invitation?" Fong Yuan nodded and handed me the invitation from his drawer. I opened it to see a photo of Fong Yuan and Yan Yan, radiating happiness. After a long silence, I asked, "Will Jianwei return for your wedding?" "You know, since she moved from Los Angeles to New York, we've lost contact. Yan Yan emailed her recently, but there's no reply yet. It's uncertain if she'll come." "Oh, I see," I replied flatly, then turned my attention back to my computer, my fingers listlessly tapping the keyboard as my eyes stared blankly at the screen. Chapter 7, The Child Was Always Yours. The entire day passed in a haze, and it wasn't until the lazy rays of the setting sun streamed through the glass that I realized it was time to leave work. Fong Yuan, at the adjacent desk, was still immersed in his tasks, while I, with little to do, took another smoke break in the restroom, waiting for the workday to end. When I returned, Yan Yan was sitting in my office chair, presumably waiting for Fong Yuan. Teasing her, I said, "Yan Yan, your hips have gotten so full, my chair can barely contain them." "You're incorrigible," she retorted, rolling her eyes. I smirked at Yan Yan, admiring her beauty. She was the epitome of sensuality, with perfectly rounded hips and long, slender legs that made for an exquisite figure. Walking down the street, her silhouette would undoubtedly be the most alluring. I approached Fong Yuan, patting his shoulder, and asked, "Have you finished the framework for the proposal?" "I've completed the overall concept and structure, just need to add some textual details," Fong Yuan replied. "I'll handle the rest." "You should leave early, don't keep Yan Yan waiting." Yan Yan, pressing her hands against my cheeks, said cheerfully, "Xiaoyang, you're so considerate, you have no idea how busy we'll be later." "Getting married is no small feat, there's bound to be a lot to do," I remarked, gently removing her hands from my face. Fong Yuan stretched, then said to me, "All right, we need to visit the wedding planning company and the bridal shop. If you have any questions, just call." "Don't worry, you two go ahead," I said, settling into Fong Yuan's chair. Fong Yuan quickly gathered his belongings, and as Yan Yan linked arms with him, she turned to me and said, "Xiaoyang, our company is launching a new building soon. If you're interested in buying, I can get you an internal price, 1,500 yuan off per square meter." As the sales director for a local real estate company, Yan Yan could indeed secure a significant discount. It would save me tens of thousands on a house, yet even with this offer, I couldn't afford it. "We'll see," I replied. Fong Yuan asked, "Which development is it?" "The second phase of Zhongyuan Ecological City," Yan Yan answered. Fong Yuan, setting down his briefcase, said seriously, "Xiaoyang, you should buy it. This development is excellent, and who knows when the next opportunity will come. Plus, property prices are bound to skyrocket." "By what?" "You know my financial situation," I retorted. "We have some savings. We can lend you a few tens of thousands. Ask your dad for help with the down payment, it should be feasible. You two already have your own mortgage and car loans to pay, not to mention the upcoming wedding expenses. Don't worry about me." Yan Yan added, "Repaying the loans together is manageable. Xiaoyang, buying a house will also make it easier for you to find a girlfriend. We hate to see you struggling like this." Paying a mortgage with what money? I can't even support myself. I burst out. Alright, it's getting late, just go. Yen Yen and Fong Yuan exchanged a look, sighed softly, and left after one last glance at me standing by the floor-to-ceiling window. I watched them walk towards their white Mazda 6, feeling a mix of emotions. Fong Yuan, Yen Yen, and I were all graduates of Suzhou University. They had a house, a car, and were about to get married. I couldn't understand why there was such a gap between us. Was it a cruel joke by fate, or was it my own doing? Lost in thought, I wondered, if Jianwei and I hadn't broken up, would we be getting married now? At 9 p.m., I finally finished the proposal Fong Yuan had left, stretched, and headed to the break room for a last cup of coffee before leaving. Listening absent-mindedly to the coffee pouring, it seemed like a gentle call, stripping away any desire to escape. Gulping down my coffee, I gazed out at the night, with its neon lights fighting the darkness, and longed to shed this weary body. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was La Yao again. Where are you? She asked weakly. Working late, I replied indifferently. Can you come help me with the laundry? I can't get my hands wet. Don't you have a washing machine? I snapped, irritated. There are some clothes that need hand washing, she said, sounding exhausted. Take them to a dry cleaner. I've been working all day and I'm exhausted, I refused firmly. Underwear and bras can't go to the dry cleaner. Are you crazy, asking me to wash your underwear? I just had surgery. My hands really can't get wet. Can't you show some sympathy, she pleaded, her voice breaking. Stop acting. I know you graduated from drama school, I retorted. Liao started to cry. I had your child, and this is how you treat me? Do you know how much it hurts? Enough with the melodrama, I said. You beast. I'll die to prove it, she cried hysterically. Alright, I'll come. Just stop, I relented. Come quickly. I'm waiting, she said, suddenly calm. As I heard the phone click off, I couldn't help but think, if Liao doesn't become an award-winning actress, the industry will have lost a true talent. Her acting was impeccable. Leaving the office, I waited for a taxi, suddenly remembering I had promised Micah I would help her move. It was almost 9:30. Will she throw my stuff out again? I muttered to myself. A taxi pulled up, and I decided to first deal with Liao's laundry. Moving Micah's things could wait. 15 minutes later, I arrived at Liao's apartment, furiously ringing the doorbell. She opened the door in her pajamas, holding a stuffed animal, looking so pitiful that my prepared harsh words died in my throat. I only muttered, "You're such a drama queen." "If you hadn't slept with me, there wouldn't be all this trouble," she replied, stepping aside to let me in. Ignoring her, I asked, "Where are the clothes?" "In the laundry basket in the bathroom." I went to the bathroom and was stunned to see 2 overflowing laundry baskets. "Are you stockpiling laundry to torture me?" Liao didn't respond, just turned up the volume on the TV in the living room. Annoyed but resigned, I sorted the clothes, putting those that could be machine washed in one pile, those needing hand washing in another, and underwear in a third. I spent the next hour washing clothes, both by hand and with the machine. When I finally finished, I hung the clothes to dry on the balcony, then lit a cigarette to ease my fatigue. Liao approached with a fruit platter. "Want some?" she asked softly. "No appetite," I replied, taking a deep drag of my cigarette. She took the cigarette from my fingers and wiped the sweat from my forehead with a tissue. "The magazine says a man who washes a woman's underwear is gentle and reliable." "Get lost. You think I wanted to help you?" I snapped. Despite my harsh words, Liao clung to my arm and asked, "Have you ever done this for another woman?" "No," I replied irritably. "Not even for Jianwei," she persisted. Enough with the questions. I pushed her away unfazed by my attitude. She continued to stare at me. Putting on my coat, I said, "I'm leaving. Don't call me again." Liao grabbed my arm. "You can't leave." "Let go," I said, shaking her off. Blocking the door, she said, "I have something for you," and pulled a prepared bank card from her pocket. "There's 10,000 yuan on this card. I know you spent a lot of money. Where did you get the money?" I asked, surprised. "I borrowed it from the crew," she replied. "Did you suddenly grow a conscience?" I asked sarcastically. Looking at me with sad eyes, she said, "The child was always yours. I just wanted to see if you'd take responsibility." I'll repay what you spent. The more sincere she looked, the more I felt she was acting. To me, she was just a woman lost in the glitz and glamour of the city. Her talk of responsibility was hollow. She insisted the child was mine, maybe out of a need to fill an emotional void, or perhaps she herself didn't know the father people like us lived in a superficial world, or our hearts were empty. In the end, I didn't take her money, even though I needed it. Perhaps I pitied her. Despite my harsh words, I couldn't abandon her in her time of need. No matter how glamorous she appeared, I understood her emptiness because we were the same. The only difference was she might become famous one day, while I was destined to live a lonely, ordinary life. Leaving Liao's place, I immediately took a taxi to my former residence, hoping Micah hadn't thrown out my belongings again. I didn't want to work overtime or be roped into washing Liao's clothes, but life had a way of forcing my hand. Chapter 8: The repercussions awaited. The vehicle glided into that dilapidated residential area. I pressed the button to lower the car window, scrutinizing whether my luggage had been unloaded by Micah. To my satisfaction, despite my failure to adhere to our agreement, my belongings were nowhere to be seen downstairs. It seemed my previous warning had its desired effect. Ascending the stairs lightly, I entered the dimly lit apartment. Despite my anticipation, Micah's room remained shrouded in darkness. Evidently, she hadn't returned tonight. No wonder her car wasn't spotted downstairs, and no wonder she hadn't removed my luggage. Her absence proved advantageous. Tonight, I could once again freeload for a night. Perhaps this was the sole solace bestowed upon me by fate at day's end. After a brief ablution, I reclined on the bed. As I extinguished the lights and shut my eyes, the world suddenly quieted. I anticipated slipping into slumber swiftly in this state, yet fragments of memories recklessly invaded my mind. These fragments all pertained to the past, dredging up the emptiness and desolation of the present. I couldn't comprehend why Fang Yuan and Yan Yan managed to persevere and eventually marry after graduation, while my conclusion with Jianwei was so bleak. What had I failed to do adequately? I earnestly wished Jianwei would articulate her grievances to me, yet such a simple request had become an extravagance. Thus, I languished in agony for 2 inexplicable years, deteriorating for 2 years. I vigorously rubbed my face, sitting up from the bed. After a prolonged contemplation, I retrieved the long-neglected guitar from the cabinet. I desired to sing a song, for myself. For Jianwei. Tuning the strings with precision, I plucked them, and the melody of Yao Hao's Lost resonated from my lips. Who can clearly discern this bustle, once again, lost in sight? Who can evade this clamor, once again, encroaching upon you? Who has ever mentioned these past events, once again, forgotten by you? Who will encounter in the next life, once again, able to love you? I am lost, unable to find the map. This path of emotions is so arduous. I am lost, unable to find an exit. Why has the world become so numb? I am lost, unable to find the way back. The people beside me are like strangers. I am lost, standing still in place, while your heart has flown afar. As I reached the final line, a warmth spread at the corners of my eyes. I was truly lost, lost indeed. I thought I had journeyed far in these 2 years, only to find myself stagnant on a map called love, while her heart had soared away. Lighting a cigarette, I barely took a drag when the door was abruptly knocked, startling me to the point of almost snapping the guitar strings. Wasn't the house supposed to be vacant? Micah's voice came from outside the door. If you're in the mood for singing, please find a place where no one resides. This is a residential area, after all. Slipping on slippers, I opened the door. Micah stood before me in a camisole pajama, her well-proportioned figure rivaling Yan Yan's, her pretty face surprisingly serene under the dim light, rendering her incomparably elegant. Didn't you just hear me sing? Am I lost? If we're both lost, can you find a place where no one resides? I retorted with a wry smile. Making a weak argument. Ignoring Micah's discontent, I inquired, how come you're at home? I've been here all along. But I didn't see your car downstairs. It's parked in the opposite vacant lot. Indeed. I sighed, immediately contemplating shutting the door, fearing Micah might bring up the topic of moving. It was nearly 1 a.m, where could I possibly relocate to? Micah pressed against the door with both hands, thwarting my attempts. I glared at her angrily and questioned, you don't actually intend for me to move out now, do you? No. Micah paused before continuing, you seemed eager to sing and lost again, didn't you? I can take you to a deserted place where you can vent freely. Really? Are you this kind? I asked warily. Well, you've deprived me of sleep with your racket. If you're still interested, I can be your audience, she added after a moment. Your voice isn't bad. I sensed that this was Micah's initiative to mend our relationship, or perhaps she was impressed by my singing, or she pitied this desolate man. Regardless of her motives, I felt inclined to agree to her request. After all, I couldn't sleep either, so let's go mad together. Moments later, Micah changed into suitable attire, while I remained in my pajamas, slipping on slippers, guitar in hand. We proceeded downstairs. Micah brought her own car, and I sat in the passenger seat, having experienced luxury cars before but never a Q7. I couldn't help but glance around. Before I could fasten my seatbelt, Micah floored the accelerator, the Q7's formidable power nearly smashing me against the windshield. It's late at night. Are you trying to have a corpse seated next to you? I rubbed my throbbing head and exclaimed in anger. Who told you not to fasten your seatbelt? Those who don't abide by rules deserve what they get. Micah replied indifferently. I pointed at Micah angrily, feeling helpless. You're just retaliating against me. Micah ignored me completely, driving on without a change in expression. After about 20 minutes, Micah truly brought me to a remote wilderness where no one would venture. She stopped the car, pulled up the handbrake, and finally turned off the engine, saying to me, "There's no one here, sing to your heart's content." The space in the car is too small, I can't fully express myself, I protested. Then get out and sing. Do you think I'm foolish? If you drive away later, where will I go to complain? I cautioned, suspecting she had ill intentions since she intentionally started the car while I wasn't wearing a seatbelt. You talk too much. Micah said, releasing her seatbelt and stepping out of the car, looking as if she were the noble one and I the petty one. I also got out of the car and stood beside Micah, realizing only now that the weather this night was pleasant, the moon and stars shining brightly. The air was refreshing, and I felt a sense of relief from the hustle and bustle. As my heart gradually calmed down, I truly appreciated Micah's willingness to bring me to this quiet place. I needed to vent, to release the many grievances and dissatisfaction in my heart. Plucking the guitar strings, I began with a song by Jean Woollien, Transformation. After finishing the song, to my surprise, Micah applauded and asked, "Do you also like Yen Su's music?" "Yes, if there were more instruments, it would feel even more profound," I replied, somewhat astonished that Micah knew the song. After all, Yen Su's music was not mainstream. It required a certain level of aesthetic and scholarly appreciation, both for performers and listeners. Micah nodded, saying, "You don't seem as simple as you look." "Judging people by appearances is your narrow-mindedness," I retorted. Micah didn't bother about our verbal sparring and urged me, "Please continue." I put down the guitar and said to Micah, "You seem to know about music. Can you play the guitar? How about playing a song?" We agreed that I would be the audience. "You continue," she insisted. I nodded. In this dim night, amidst boundless wilderness, there was a remarkably beautiful woman willing to be my audience. It felt like a gift from heaven. With this thought, I suddenly felt more guilty about my earlier rudeness to Micah. In fact, she had been quite good to me, lending me money, accommodating me for the night, and now accompanying me to vent my frustrations. Perhaps I really should change my rough temper. A gust of cold wind blew by, and Micah subconsciously adjusted her somewhat thin clothes. Feeling a pang of guilt, I said to her, "You should get back in the car." "I'll vent on my own." "Are you sure?" she asked. I nodded. Micah opened the car door and got in, but she didn't completely isolate herself from me. She pressed the window button with one hand, resting her chin on the other, looking at me as if she were eagerly awaiting my next song. I plucked the guitar strings and sang another song. Lost in the moment, the car behind suddenly started. I turned around abruptly to find Micah had fastened her seatbelt. With a smile that seemed both genuine and sly, she said to me, "Your voice is really good. But I have to go now. This is the consequence for your breach of promise and your rude behavior." With that, the car broke through the darkness of the night like an arrow shot from a bow. Damn it! I kicked off my slippers and hurled them at her car, but it was a feeble attempt. "You bloody hell, you scheming woman. I knew you had ulterior motives. Using my sympathy, you'd better watch out for divine retribution. Damn it! This isn't over between us." I paced around in a fit of anger, shouting incoherently at the disappearing Micah. I've always been too familiar with everyone, too trusting, and I don't like being cautious. I deserve this end. Chapter 9, Repaying Malice with Kindness. Micah sped at 100 miles per hour for 20 minutes to bring me here, meaning I was now at least 30 kilometers away from home. I felt like dying. Why do all these absurd things happen to me lately? Picking up my slippers from the ground, adjusting my clothes, I looked up thankfully to see the North Star still twinkling. Finding the brightest star, Yuhong, I oriented myself and headed towards the distant blurry lights, like a lonely fugitive. After half an hour of walking, I finally saw a road with passing vehicles. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be the junction of Suzhou and Wuxi on the Shanghai-Nanjing Expressway. After a struggle that almost reached dawn, a kind passerby finally gave me a ride to the city center. I then took a taxi back home. Because I didn't have my wallet, I couldn't even pay the fare. I tossed the remaining half-pack of cigarettes to the driver and ran off. Entering the community, flames of anger began to burn within me. I wanted to talk to Micah, not about life or ideals, but about why she treated me this way. Back in the house, I placed the guitar on the living room table and went to Micah's door. I knocked fiercely as if to vent. Is it fun to play me? Do you know I have to work tomorrow? I glanced at the sky outside, which was already getting bright, and corrected myself. Today. You've kept me up all night. How can I go to work in this state? If the boss isn't pleased, he'll sack me. Do you intend to support me? I rambled on incessantly, but there was no response from inside the room. If you want me to curse even harsher, just keep pretending not to hear me. I knocked on the door again. Still, there was no response from inside. Could it be that she hasn't returned? I wondered, turning the doorknob, only to find it locked. Since I was already scum in Micah's eyes, breaking into her room wouldn't add much to my list of crimes. I found the key to her room among a bunch of keys, then opened the door. Regardless of whether she was asleep, I had to have a word with her. I turned on the light and finally saw Micah lying sideways on the bed, covered with a blanket, facing away from me. Still silent, you sleep so soundly. Have you ever considered the suffering I've endured? The wind blowing on me all the way here made my nose run. Achoo. I sneezed, rubbing my nose, then angrily said, I'll sue you. In all my 20-something years, I've never seen anyone behave like you, so sneaky and dishonest. I continued to rant endlessly, but she remained as calm as a mountain, unmoved. Just as I was about to pull her up from the bed to confront her face to face, she suddenly had a severe coughing fit. According to common sense, if my sneeze just now was due to a cold, then her coughing fit definitely indicated a fever. She must have caught a cold from the wind last night. I paused for a moment, then exclaimed, what goes around comes around. You're getting your just desserts. Micah coughed again, but she didn't speak to me, either because she couldn't be bothered or because the pain from the fever made her too weak to engage with me. Get out, Micah said coldly after a while. No need to remind me. I enjoy watching others suffer. I hope you choke to death. Serves you right, karma. I said as I strode out of Micah's room. Planning to take a hot bath and then rest for a while, I intermittently heard coughing from Micah's room. I stopped in my tracks to the bathroom, suddenly caught in a struggle. After all, there was only me, a man, in this house, and her coughing sounded so helpless. Could I really just stand by and watch? Forget it. After being scum for so long, I might as well do a good deed. Consider it accumulating some virtue, I said to myself. I placed the towel on the sofa, walked to the kitchen, found a piece of ginger and a bag of brown sugar, and lit the gas stove to make ginger brown sugar soup. I was already so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. I lit a cigarette to wake myself up, then numbly watched the ginger brown sugar soup boiling in the pot. The sun had already risen on the eastern horizon, casting its rays through the window. A breeze gently brushed past the hanging spider plants on the balcony. The morning exuded a familiar vitality and freshness that had persisted for billions of years. I was somewhat entranced. This moment seemed enchanting, as if it belonged to me alone. Perhaps, compared to this rare morning, I didn't actually like the night's revelry and indulgence that much. Micah's coughing brought me out of my reverie. I realized the ginger soup had been boiling in the pot for quite some time. I turned off the gas stove, scooped a bowlful, and headed towards Micah's room. I boiled some ginger soup. Drink it. I stood beside Micah's bed and said to her. No need to be so kind, she replied. Who's being kind? I'm just worried that your coughing will keep me awake. I grumbled. Micah ungratefully retorted, if you move out, you won't have to hear it anymore. I'm moving out. Even if you cough to death at home, no one will know. Stop talking and drink the ginger soup. I put down the bowl in my hand, propped up her pillow, and rudely helped her sit up. I felt her forehead and indeed, she had a fever. I picked up the bowl from the bedside table and handed it to her. "Drink the ginger soup first." Micah didn't resist her body anymore. She took the ginger soup from my hand and started drinking. Although she remained silent, her expression was not as cold as before. "After you finish drinking, just sleep under the covers. Leave the bowl, I'll come back to collect it later. You have a slight fever. Take some fever-reducing medicine and sweat it out," I instructed. Afraid of worsening my own cold, I put on a thick coat before going out. I rarely fell ill, and we didn't have many everyday medications at home, so I had to go to the pharmacy to buy some fever-reducing and cough medicine for Mikey. It was still too early, and the pharmacy hadn't opened yet. After running around for a while, I finally found an open clinic. I bought the medicine and immediately took a taxi back. By the time I got back, it was already 7:30. Returning to the apartment, I went to Micah's room, but she was already asleep. Seeing her breathing evenly and her peaceful expression, I didn't wake her up. I found her phone in her bag and dialed my number. Then, I left a note on her bedside table: "Remember to take the fever-reducing and cough medicine when you wake up. If you have any trouble, call me. I've already saved my number in your phone. To the scum in your eyes, but an angel in mine, Zhao Yang." I gently tucked her in and left her room. After taking a hot shower and skipping breakfast, I caught the company bus to work. I was so tired that I could barely keep my eyes open. I yawned continuously, then ended up sleeping with one hand supporting my chin in a professional-looking pose. If you didn't come close, you wouldn't notice that I was sleeping. As Feng Yuan was busy preparing for his wedding, he didn't arrive at the company until almost 10 o'clock. He woke me up with a slap on the shoulder. "Did you go clubbing again last night?" Thinking about what happened last night made me irritated, but there was no need to vent my anger on Feng Yuan. I yawned and replied, "I didn't sleep well. I was tossed around all night." Feng Yuan misunderstood my meaning and said, "You should pay attention to your kidney. Although you're still young, you can't resist all the chaos in women. We're both cultured people. Can you speak more subtly?" I retorted. Feng Yuan sighed, "I have no choice. With so many things to buy, Yan Yan can't carry them all by herself. I have to go to Shanghai with the commercial department later to discuss setting up a Gucci counter in our mall. Can't let my personal matters affect the company's plans for several months." "Okay," I replied, yawning again. Being deceived and wandering the streets for most of the night had left me exhausted. Feng Yuan patted my shoulder and said, "Take a break. I'll treat you to dinner tonight." I waved to Feng Yuan, "Go handle your business. I'll catch some more sleep." "Don't sleep. Yan Yan is waiting for you downstairs in the company." Feng Yuan paused, then whispered in my ear, "By the way." Jian Wei replied to the email. "There's an 80% chance she'll come back from the US on the day Yan Yan and I get married." I stared at Feng Yuan, suddenly wide awake. After 3 years, was she finally coming back? Chapter 10, Among the Masses Lurk Villains. After a moment, Feng Yuan and I descended together. He boarded the company's executive car, while I settled into Yan Yan's vehicle. My nerves plunged into an inexplicable agony. I even silently reproached Feng Yuan for his sudden disclosure about Jiansu's imminent return. After a 3-year hiatus, I was utterly at a loss as to what sentiments to muster to confront her. Countless days and nights I had feverishly yearned to see her, yet I also dreaded it. Afraid of the ensuing silence and awkwardness. As Yan Yan started the car and, after changing lanes, glanced at the rearview mirror, she inquired, "Zhao Yang, why do you appear so preoccupied?" She shook her head and added, "It's quite unlike you." I chuckled and replied, "Must one be carefree to resemble me?" "Did Feng Yuan inform you about Jiansu's imminent return?" "Yes," I affirmed, while lighting a cigarette. "No wonder then. Apart from Jiansu, there seems to be no one capable of unsettling your melancholic nerves," Zhao Yang, Yan Yan lamented. "You're overthinking. She's not that unbeatable, and I'm not that fragile," I continued to smile in response. Yan Yan shrugged and said, "Zhao Yang, self-awareness is key. The more radiant your smile, the deeper the heartache, isn't it?" Speaking as though you know me so well, this time, I finally relinquished the smile that Yan Yan deemed a facade, in an attempt to prove that I wasn't as wounded as she suggested. "After so many years of friendship, if I don't understand you, who will?" Jiayang, let me speak frankly, though we both empathize with you and Jiansu, I also must tell you, when a woman's heart changes, the man she once loved becomes like a cigarette smoked by another, incapable of providing pleasure, only leaving one's eyes reddened. At this point, all she can do is discard this used cigarette. Do you grasp my meaning? Why tell me all this? I asked, taking a deep drag of my cigarette. Hoping you'll be more graceful. I remained silent for a while, then with a hint of reluctance, I queried, what is love to you? Isn't it a promise followed by lifelong dedication? Why make promises if lacking the courage to commit? Jiayan, love is truly not as simplistic as you imagine. Why did Fang Yuan and I manage to endure, while you and Jiansu couldn't? You should understand, Yan Yan replied. Once again, I fell silent. Indeed, I understood. Fang Yuan and Yan Yan, though not from affluent families, had decent backgrounds, a perfect match. Whereas Jiansu and I vividly remembered, before her departure abroad, her father bought her a Cadillac CTS as her graduation gift. But can love truly be gauged by material possessions? I wasn't so sure. Yan Yan continued, Jiansu did genuinely love you. You know she went to study in the US to escape her parents' arranged marriage. She hoped that after 3 years abroad, her parents would accept her relationship with you. But why did she decide to break up with you after reaching the US? I also find it perplexing. Perhaps it truly was because I didn't want to relive the emotions of our breakup. Interrupting Yan Yan, I said, enough. As you said, when she fell out of love, I became like a cigarette devoid of pleasure. I merely used that as an analogy. Yan Yan attempted to console. In this world, there exists a type of person with a unique ability, capable of comforting someone on the brink of death until they truly perish. Undoubtedly, Yan Yan was one of them. Throughout the entire day, I accompanied Yan Yan to purchase the items listed by Fang Yuan for their upcoming wedding. It wasn't until evening that Yan Yan and I briefly dined together before parting ways. Despite not sleeping a wink the previous night and toiling all day today, as night approached, I found myself devoid of any trace of sleep. Walking the streets, each time I glimpsed couples cuddling under neon lights passing by, an endless wave of loneliness and emptiness engulfed me. Out of habit, I sought to empty myself, as if my nights were meant for nightlife. I told myself, perhaps a drink or two would ease my restlessness tonight. Listening to the booming bar music, observing the shifting flashing lights, and witnessing the frenzy of gyrating bodies, after consuming several bottles of beer, I began to feel somewhat dizzy. I relished this sensation, no worries, no love-hate entanglements, only a misty and illusory ambience. In this bar, there were 2 resident bands, alternating performances each night. Tonight, it was Robin's band, Nerve Rupture, performing. Robin and I got along well, occasionally jamming together. Robin teasingly plucked the guitar strings, producing a friction-like noise, and grinned at me, Zhao Yang, come join us? Setting down my beer bottle, I leaped onto the stage, snatched the guitar from Robin's hands, and addressed the other band members, let's play Sunset Return. Nods of agreement followed, and various instruments commenced their melody. Amidst flashing lights, heavy metal music began to swell. Driven by the release of intoxication, I stood with one foot on the prop resembling an ammunition box, fervently strumming the electric guitar with roaring explosive vocals. I sang, fantasy hands clutching the flag, the coat concealing my bones, desperately recalling the route I took, turning around to smash into the clanging wall. Oh my, I can't return, oh my, you're burdened, oh mother, swiftly give birth to me, give birth to me. Raising my voice, stretching my neck. Before completing the song, a long-haired, jacket-clad, chain-wearing delinquent-like youth in the audience yelled at me, what the hell are you, hillbilly, singing? Change the damn song already. I halted, squinting at him, say that again, punk. The long-haired youth kicked over the nearest drum set, you dumbass, I told you to change the song. You. Standing elevated, I kicked him in the face, as if finding solace in this outburst. Then, I leaped off the stage, guitar in hand, and began smashing it. In the blink of an eye, the guitar lay in ruins, and the long-haired youth writhed on the ground, wailing in agony. Several of the youth's companions brandished beer bottles and rushed toward me, but were intercepted by Robin and the band members. Amidst the chaos, I saw someone dialing the police, so I hastily discarded the wreckage of the guitar and fled outside the bar. In the interrogation room of the police station, lights shone upon me. Across from me sat a middle-aged policeman who appeared somewhat amiable. Name, gender, age, occupation. It's officer, that punk was truly asking for it. He was the one who kicked our drum set. You know, for us musicians, our instruments are like family. He harmed my little brother. How could I let it slide? Officer, I didn't mean to get into a fight, it's just that there are villains among the masses. I lamented with a mournful expression. Kid, spare me the talk. No matter how justified you feel, fighting is wrong. The law doesn't grant you that privilege, understand? Officer, I understand my mistake. I've deeply reflected and repented. I shouldn't have disregarded the authority of the law. I'll raise my awareness and strive to be a law-abiding citizen, never dragging down the harmony of society again. Alright, enough of the melodrama. Go pay the fine. No detention, right? I cautiously inquired. The guy you beat up only suffered superficial injuries and agreed to settle privately. You cover his medical expenses and compensation for lost wages, plus the fine. It totals 6,000 yuan. 6,000. Officer, I don't have that much money on me. Call your family or friends. Hearing the words family and friends, I suddenly felt lost. At this moment, I truly realized how lonely I was in this city where I had lived for 2 years. I definitely couldn't call Fang Yuan or Yen Yen. Firstly, they were on the verge of getting married, and I didn't want to burden them with this trouble. Secondly, they had repeatedly expressed their desire for me to live a stable life. It's better not to let them know about such matters, lest I disappoint them. After much contemplation, the face of someone who loathed me intensely yet was overly beautiful emerged in my mind. Mikai, yes, I'll call Mikai. After all, in her eyes, I'm nothing but scum, lacking any dignity. Let her help me pay the fine first, and then next week when I receive my salary, I'll repay her the money I owe her. Fortunately, I had her phone number jotted down in the morning. Taking out my phone from my pocket, I found Mikai's number and dialed it immediately. Chapter 11, Silent Men and Tearful Women. After several beep-beep sounds, the telephone was answered. Preceding Mikai, I inquired with feigned concern, have you taken the fever-reducing and cough-suppressing medicine I bought for you? I have, Mikai replied flatly, devoid of the previous disdain but rather lacking enthusiasm. Are you feeling any better? A bit, Mikai responded, followed by a bout of coughing. Please wear more clothing, warmth facilitates a quick recovery, I advised earnestly. Why should I wear so much clothing when I'm not going out? Mikai retorted. Seeing Mikai being led into the conversation, I finally revealed, I actually need your help with something. You see, I'm currently at the police station, got into a fight, and don't have enough money to pay the fine. Could you come over and assist with the payment? Mikai paused before asking, you got into a fight? Indeed, that rascal deserved it. I confronted him to teach him not to live so recklessly. You seem to live just as recklessly as anyone else, Mikai retorted, leaving me without a clear response. Anxiously, I inquired, so, are you coming or not? Can you give me a definite answer? Mikai remained silent, her silence seemingly deliberate. Growing impatient, I pressed, will you come? They're nearly resorting to vigilante justice here. Before Mikai could respond, the police officer erupted in anger, rebuking, we are law enforcement officers, not members of the underworld. What do you mean by vigilante justice? I hurriedly covered the phone, whispering, calm down, calm down. I merely exaggerated to prompt her to come and assist me in paying the fine, which would free me and ease your workload, wouldn't it, officer? The officer gestured for me to sort it out quickly and fell silent. Yet, I anxiously awaited Mikai's reply. If she refused to come, I would truly have no other option but to trouble Fang Yuan and his wife. As if making a difficult decision, Mikai finally asked, which police station? Relieved, I answered, Guanqian Police Station. With a simple Mikai hung up the phone. Her ambiguous attitude plunged me into unease. Considering her previous act of abandoning me in a desolate area 30 kilometers from the city, it wasn't entirely implausible for her to deceive me again. The police officer departed, leaving me alone in the interrogation room. For me at that moment, the cold walls and the inscription of leniency for confession, severity for resistance symbolized legal solemnity, somewhat suffocating me. I longed to leave this place, but as time passed, I began to doubt whether I had been deceived once more. Half an hour later, the tightly shut door finally opened, revealing a female police officer. She addressed me, are you Zhao Yan? Someone has paid your fine. Bring your ID and register. Her words relieved the tension that had gripped me. As I rose from the chair, I felt a sense of exhaustion wash over me, yet my heart was free from the weight and oppression. She had truly come to rescue me from the depths of despair. Walking alongside Nikai, I couldn't shake off a sensation of estrangement, as if traversing realms. Even the air outside, tainted with car exhaust, seemed rejuvenated. Nikai, her disheveled locks tamed behind her ears, stifled a cough with the back of her hand, braving illness to assist me in this predicament. In remorse, I addressed Nikai. Today's ordeal has burdened you. The fine and the money I owe you. I scratched my head, somewhat embarrassed. It seems even with next week's paycheck, it won't suffice. Unperturbed by the debt, Nikai paused, remarking, "You've troubled me today. Henceforth, avoid such predicaments." Self-deprecating, I chuckled, "You once deemed me scum. Brawling, womanizing, I must embody all to earn that title." Nikai's gaze, though wordless, held a revived disdain, perhaps deeming my words as obstinate folly, yet oblivious to the tinge of melancholy underlying them. Pressing forward, "Nikai," I followed suit, softening my tone, "next week's salary, along with what my father has left me, might cover your dues. But I'll lack the means to rent a place. Perhaps I could repay you first, and you'd allow me to stay another month until I'm financially afloat?" Nikai cast an enigmatic glance my way. Amid our silent exchange, a taxi, energized as if by adrenaline, halted nearby. Its door swung open hastily, revealing Lei Yao, hastily descending with her handbag. Lei Yao stood before me, facing Nikai. Similar in stature, distinct in attire, both exuded a rare elegance, captivating even the passing male officers. "Why are you here?" I queried, perplexed. With an anxious tone, Lei Yao replied, "Robin called me. He said you were taken to the police station after a brawl at the bar." "It's all sorted now," I replied, nonchalantly ignoring me. Lei Yao turned to Nikai. "Miss, could you give us some privacy? Xiao Yang and I need to talk." Uninterested in lingering, Nikai simply nodded, making her way to her car and departing. It seemed a troublesome night indeed. Feeling agitated, I instinctively lit a cigarette. Glancing towards where Nikai disappeared, Lei Yao inquired, "Did she pay your fine for you?" "Obvious matters need not be asked, all right?" I retorted impatiently. "What's your relationship with her?" "It's whatever you think it is," I replied dismissively. My indifference and impatience seemed to dampen Lei Yao's spirits, plunging her into silence. Midway through my cigarette, I finally addressed Lei Yao, "You should go back. It's windy, and you just had surgery, your body can't handle it." Shaking her head, Lei Yao refused to leave, then asked, "Why did you fight? Is something bothering you?" I paused, puzzled by her question. Only then did I question myself, why did I fight? During my 2 years in bars, encountering all sorts of drunken chaos, I'd always chosen to ignore. Why did I refuse today? Though reluctant to admit, it was indeed related to the news of Jianwei's return. Previously, with her afar, the pains remained dormant, but her impending return seemed to awaken them, tormenting my fragile psyche. Looking at Lei Yao, I rubbed my face heavily. "Consider this a plea, stop asking, all right? Am I so bothersome to you, Xiao Yang?" Lei Yao, tearful-eyed, uttered softly. I remained silent, smoking, as Lei Yao and I staged a classic scene of silent melancholy in the chilly night breeze. After a while, Lei Yao finally spoke, "I'll be heading to Hangdian next week, the production is starting early." "Is that so?" "I wish you all the success," I replied casually. Lei Yao regarded me with a complex gaze, gently stating, "My reason for informing you isn't for your well wishes, it's only to hope that in my absence, you can live well, or at least find some happiness." I stayed silent, emotions intertwined, yet unable to pinpoint their origin. From her bag, Lei Yao retrieved a pen, saying, "Give me your hand." Though unsure of her intentions, I mechanically extended my hand. Lei Yao wrote down a series of digits, handing it to me. "I'll be in Hengdian for a long time. If you're feeling down or troubled, call me at this number. We can at least chat like friends." Pausing, she added, "This number is active 24/7. I didn't know what to say, just silently watched her. Lei Yao stowed the pen away, offered me a faint smile, "Until we meet again after this long hiatus. Farewell, Xiao Yang." Watching Lei Yao's departing figure, I unexpectedly felt a pang of farewell. Perhaps even in a casual relationship, prolonged time could foster some sentiment. Though most times, I detested the troubles she brought late into the night, it was time for me to return. But where should I go? Though I still resided in that worn yet comforting abode, it was only through audacity. If Nikai insisted on my departure, where should I place my melancholy, loss, and solitude? Should I truly surrender them to the boundless night? No, I didn't want to leave. It was time for a heartfelt conversation with Mikai, even if it meant pleading for her shelter, only to properly contain my melancholy, loss, and solitude. Chapter 12, Requesting to Share Accommodation. As the night deepened and the alcohol wore off, I zipped up my jacket, lit a cigarette, and wandered aimlessly under the neon lights, my mind filled with endless trivialities. I suddenly grew weary of my current existence, yearning to make something meaningful of my life, yet unsure where to begin, thus deepening my sense of bewilderment. Passing by a hotel, I observed the scattered lights emanating from its numerous windows, as if peering into the rhythmic movements of bodies on beds, causing the entire building to sway on this night. Some indulged in the seduction of nocturnal warmth within cozy rooms, while others, like wilting flowers, trudged the streets, enduring the loneliness of the night. However, it is precisely due to such contrasts that the world appears so vivid and authentic. I should understand that this world is inherently complex and contradictory. Solitude and loss are burdens borne by some, so there's no need for me to feel aggrieved or resentful. Yet, tonight's moonlight was so brilliant, exposing the loneliness with nowhere to hide. Thus, I implore the celestial beings to switch off the moon's illumination. I am willing to bear solitude, but not to expose it to this harsh world. Returning to my lodgings, I habitually glanced around downstairs but didn't spot Mikai's car. Circling to the opposite side of the building, her car was indeed parked there, indicating her customary spot. I squatted beside her car, smoked another cigarette, then went back upstairs. I lingered at Mikai's door for a while before finally knocking. "Mikai, are you asleep?" I asked softly. "Is something the matter? I'd like to talk to you." Mikai's expected response came, "There's nothing between us to discuss. At least let me express my gratitude in person for tonight's events. I'm truly thankful." "No need." Mikai's rejection remained succinct. "I insist. It doesn't sit well with me if left unsaid." I said, then, without her consent, opened her door under the pretext of gratitude. The light was still on inside. Mikai sat at her desk, engrossed in reading, or perhaps going through documents. Seemingly accustomed to my rudeness, Mikai didn't react to my entering without permission. I approached her from behind, glanced at what she was reading, and asked, "What are you reading?" Mikai ignored me, her focus still on the documents. I stood there, contemplating how to broach the subject of continuing to stay here with Mikai. "Does it seem appropriate to you, a man, standing quietly in a woman's room at this late hour?" Mikai coldly questioned. "I just wanted to thank you in person. That's all," I hurriedly explained. "Then go ahead, and then leave." "Oh." I responded, then tried to please her. "By the way, did you take your medicine tonight? I heard you coughing earlier." Mikai closed the document, frowned at me, and said, "If you have something to say, say it quickly. I'm ready to rest." "You asked me to speak, so don't turn hostile if I do." I hastily added. "Then don't say it." "But I must. Once words are spoken, they're like spilled water. You wanted me to speak, so I must." After a brief pause, I finally said, "Well, to be honest with you, I have no intention of moving out at all." I instinctively straightened my posture, attempting to assert dominance over Mikai and persuade her to agree to my request to stay. Mikai calmly looked at me and said, "I already told you that you don't have to repay the debt for now, so you have no reason not to move out." "I've already said I don't want to move out. Don't you understand what I mean?" I raised my voice. "But you promised me more than once that you would move out. Is your promise so cheap in your own eyes?" Mikai's words were icy, her eyes flashing with anger. "Why is it bad for me to stay here?" I retorted angrily. While Mikai failed to understand me, I also failed to understand her. In this city, many people share accommodations. Why was I so reliant on this room, yet she kept relentlessly pushing me away? Besides, I believe I'm a very reliable roommate, a safe one. Mikai countered, "Can you tell me what's good about you?" "Everything." After a moment's thought, I continued, "With me here, if there are any neighborhood disputes in the future, I can easily handle them for you. I tell you, I'm the boss of this neighborhood." "Don't be so childish, alright?" Mikai interrupted me. I sneered, "You don't believe me, do you? You can go to other neighborhoods and see if there are noisy square dancing aunties disturbing the peace every night. Do you find any in our neighborhood?" "No. Let me tell you, although this neighborhood lacks property management, having me around is much better than any property management. Even if what you say is true, it still can't be a reason for you to continue staying here. You have to move out." Mikai remained resolute. I grew angry once again. Are you daft? What's wrong with letting me stay here? At the very least, if a pipe is clogged, a light is broken, I can fix them. If it rains, and you're not home, I'll help bring in the laundry. For example, today, when you were sick, I couldn't just stand by and watch. I had to buy you medicine and cook a bowl of ginger soup for you. Why must you insist on making both of us unhappy? I'm not unhappy. Mikai's words silenced me. After an awkward silence, I said, anyway, I don't want to move out. I owe you so much money, I think repaying you first is more important than moving out. Unexpectedly, Mikai asked, can you tell me why repaying the money is more important than moving out? With little thought, I replied, once I repay your money, I'll feel relieved. But moving out makes me feel like I'm helpless and empty. If it were you, would you choose to repay the money first or move out first? Moving out from here doesn't mean you can't find another place to live. Where does this sense of emptiness and helplessness come from? Mikai continued to inquire. I scanned every corner of the room, a wave of indescribable emotion welling up inside me. Mikai simply didn't understand my attachment and sentimentality towards this house. Therefore, every time she tried to evict me, she wouldn't consider my feelings. But then again, she didn't really need to consider them. After all, this sentimentality was mine alone. I lit another cigarette to dispel the feelings of loss and helplessness within me. Can you not smoke in my room, please? Mikai's words dripped with disgust, but I couldn't blame her. It was my own audacity that led me to forget I was still in her room. Sorry, I'll smoke on the balcony, I murmured. After finishing a cigarette on the balcony, I returned to the living room. To my surprise, Mikai wasn't in her bedroom but sitting on the sofa in the living room. For the first time, she spoke to me voluntarily. You haven't answered my question from earlier. You asked why moving out would make one feel empty and helpless, right? Mikai nodded. I sat down on the sofa opposite Mikai, closed my eyes, and allowed memories of countless days and nights spent here to flood my mind. After a long silence, I finally spoke. I moved in here 2 years ago, during the darkest period of my life. I suffered from insomnia almost every night. The reason for my insomnia was the burden of countless thoughts I couldn't share with anyone. But keeping them bottled up inside was unbearable. So, I treated everything in this house, the floor lamp, the cabinet, the clock, even a mop, as my friends. I confided in them, pouring out my heart. Though they never responded, they were patient listeners. No matter how long I talked, they patiently listened. So, after unburdening myself, I didn't feel as distressed. I'm grateful to them, grateful to everything in this house. They were my support, my friends. That's why I don't want to leave. I love this house. Despite its simplicity, it's the safest, warmest place in my world. After I finished speaking, Mikai looked at me with a complex expression. I had no idea what that complexity meant, but I anxiously waited to see if she would allow me to continue living here. Chapter 13, Prohibited from Frequenting Nightclubs. The moonlight outside the window was surprisingly luminous, casting a dim hue into the living room through the window, dimming even the lamplight, and adding a subdued aura to Micah's ethereal beauty. I gazed at her thus, her countenance exuding tranquility, which unsettled me further. Perhaps my fondness for this humble abode couldn't sway her stoic disposition as I had hoped. After a while, Micah finally spoke to me. Do you love this house very much? I nodded earnestly. Very much, indeed. There's hardly anyone in this world who loves this unassuming abode more than I do. Micah smiled faintly, remarking, that's not necessarily true. I looked at her in astonishment. Could it be that you're the one who loves it more deeply than I do? In reality, I had always been curious as to why Micah had bought this house with Mr. Lee. Although I could envision it as some sort of affluent artistic endeavor, the true answer was probably not as simple as I imagined. Micah didn't answer my question. Instead, she asked me, how long do you intend to stay? Have you agreed? I asked with a hint of excitement. Zhao Yang, can you confront the issue first? Micah's words carried a hint of dissatisfaction. I chuckled, exclaiming, so you know my name after all. Micah frowned again. I chuckled awkwardly, fearing she might change her mind, and made an apologetic expression, repeatedly saying, I'll answer your question first. I'll answer your question first. I plan to stay. For another month, is that acceptable? Micah remained silent for a moment before finally saying, it's acceptable. But you must agree to 2 conditions first. Alright, as long as you don't kick me out, I'm willing to agree to anything, I said, patting my chest. Don't make solemn promises yet, prove it with actions, Micah retorted. Feeling embarrassed once again, I smiled awkwardly, saying, I know I lack credibility in your eyes. So, let me put it this way, I'll do my best to fulfill your requests, alright? Good, Micah paused before adding, firstly, you are not allowed to visit nightclubs anymore. Can you comply? Ah! I exclaimed involuntarily, surprised by Micah's request. Micah looked at me, waiting for my response. Despite my curiosity about why Micah made this request, considering that women's thoughts are always elusive, I didn't want to delve into the reasons. Settling in first was the top priority. Without further consideration, I nodded and said, I can. Is there another condition? During your stay here, you are not allowed to enter my room. You must return the key to my room, she stated. That's reasonable, I said, taking out the key from my pocket and placing it on the coffee table in front of Micah. Micah stood up from the sofa, and as a final remark, she said to me, remember your promise. If I find out you fail to comply with any of the conditions, you will have to move out voluntarily. After finishing my nightly ablutions, I returned to my room. This should have been a night to settle down, considering I could temporarily stay here. However, I couldn't help but indulge in idle thoughts. In 4 days, it would be the day of Fan Yuan and Yin Yin's wedding. As a longtime friend, their marriage was bound to stir something within me. In truth, I'm not opposed to marriage. If I could meet a woman with whom I share mutual affection, I too would desire marriage. However, my material circumstances are lacking, and I possess little to offer in marriage. Thus, the desire for marriage remains but a fanciful illusion, temporarily shelved. My thoughts turned to Jianwei once more. On the day of Fan Yuan and Yin Yin's wedding, we were destined to meet. If she arrives with her boyfriend or worse, her husband, will I be crushed once again? I shook my head and smiled. If indeed I were to collapse at a friend's wedding, it would be quite the grand spectacle. The next day, I arrived at the company on time, and Fan Yuan had also returned from Shanghai to Suzhou. We bumped into each other by the coffee machine in the break room. Each of us holding a cup of coffee, we engaged in casual conversation. I asked Fan Yuan, how's it going? Has the Gucci counter project been settled? Fan Yuan chuckled with relief and said, it's settled. Barring any unforeseen circumstances, we should be able to sign the contract for the store next month. Well done. Your indispensable contribution in securing a first-tier brand like Gucci for our department store deserves commendation, my ambitious friend, I said, patting Fan Yuan's shoulder with a smile. However, Fan Yuan's expression turned serious as he said to me, Zhao Yang, do you have any thoughts about your work? I can help you negotiate with higher-ups. Still smiling, I replied, you don't need to worry about me. If I have any ideas, I'll strive for them myself. I knew Fan Yuan was concerned for me, but considering his relatively recent appointment as the head of the planning and copywriting team, his experience was still limited, and the company's politics were intricate. Furthermore, our well-known friendship might not be advantageous for him. Give it up. We've worked together for 2 years, but when have you ever actively advocated for yourself? Fan Yuan's tone carried some displeasure. I laughed nonchalantly. That's because I didn't have any ideas. I find things quite satisfactory as they are. At least the work is easy. Even if the sky falls, it's you hard-working souls who climb the ladder that will be hit first. Fan Yuan was speechless at my response. After a moment, he sighed, you're quite something. It's been 2 years. I quickly interrupted, alright, let's not dwell on it. Tell me about yesterday. I spent the whole day shopping with your wife, so you owe me for that labor. Fan Yuan nodded, let's have dinner together after work. As we continued chatting, each carrying our half-finished coffee cups, we headed back to the office. Just as we were about to enter, Fan Yuan suddenly stopped me, causing coffee to spill onto my sleeve. What's wrong? I asked, shaking off the coffee from my sleeve, feeling both surprised and annoyed. Fan Yuan seemed different, especially since he suddenly asked about my work thoughts earlier. Fan Yuan looked at me with piercing eyes and after a long pause, he said. Jianwei contacted Yin Yin last night. By then, she was already preparing to board a flight back to China and should arrive in Shanghai around noon. I was momentarily stunned, feeling somewhat empty-headed, unsure how to react to this news. After a while, I asked Fan Yuan in return, what do you think? How can I go see her, carrying the status of an ex-boyfriend? If you feel awkward, then forget I mentioned it, but you'll have to meet eventually, Feng Yuan replied. Of course, I knew Feng Yuan meant we would meet at his and Yin Yan's wedding. On that day, Jianwei would attend, and so would I. But such a meeting would merely be a formality, not intentional. I thought, if I could stay composed enough and treat her as a chance encounter with a stranger, without the need for pleasantries or heart-wrenching scenes. In the morning, I still found myself distracted, intermittently working on tasks. It wasn't until noon, when all my colleagues went to the cafeteria for lunch, that I lit a cigarette, closed my eyes, and reclined on my office chair, puffing away. Amidst the dissipating tobacco scent, Jianwei's face from the day she left resurfaced in my mind, causing me some pain and confusion. Yet, I didn't know how to dispel these seemingly baseless groans of anguish. I had realized 2 years ago that the pain derived from breakup fantasies was nothing but meaningless self-torture. However, cheapness is inherent in human nature. We'd rather bear false pain with gritted teeth than rid ourselves of it and attain enlightenment. Perhaps at this moment, Jianwei was enjoying a leisurely afternoon tea with her family and friends, while I sat despondently in the empty office, engulfed in a cloud of melancholy smoke, unable to escape from the past I'd been harming myself with. As the smoke gradually dispersed, in the vast office space, I remained solitary. The warm afternoon breeze brought with it a hint of inexplicable melancholy through the open window, mirroring my mood. After a while, feeling hungry, I pocketed the cigarette and prepared to go grab something to eat. As I stepped out of the elevator, my phone rang. It was Robin calling. Answering the call, Robin sounded apologetic. "Zhao Yang, I'm really sorry about yesterday. I couldn't cover for you." I chuckled indifferently. If you're a brother, there's no need for apologies. You guys play in the band, getting into bar fights, how could I let you handle that? Which bar will dare to host your gigs in the future? Besides, it's my solemn duty as a model citizen to teach those reckless fools a lesson. You guys shouldn't join in the fun anymore. Robin also laughed and said, "Alright, brother, I won't say more. By the way, there's a fashion show at Suwa Bar tonight, with plenty of beautiful girls. I'm quite familiar with some of them. You should come, I'll introduce you to some if you're interested." "Sure," I responded almost instinctively. "Okay, tonight's on me." "Let's have a blast," Robin said. With my phone in hand, already walking away from the office building, suddenly bathed in sunlight, my thoughts seemed to expand. I abruptly remembered my promise to Micah last night, that I wouldn't go clubbing anymore. Pausing in my tracks, I recalled my unreliable words and actions towards Micah in recent days. I decided to be a man of my word this time. After a brief silence, I said to Robin, who was still waiting for my response, "Oh, look at my memory. I have some private matters tonight, so I won't be able to make it. What could be more important than having a great time with us?" Robin jokingly asked, but also somewhat surprised. In his eyes, Zhao Yang, always treated eating, drinking, and having fun as the most important things in life. Some matters take precedence. Let's reschedule for another day. I really can't make it today, I replied. Robin responded with a slight disappointment but ultimately didn't insist. He was granting my wish to have an uneventful evening due to my commitment to keeping promises. After ending the call, I walked along the street, feeling somewhat surprised by my own transformation. Even if I had agreed to Robin's invitation, it wouldn't have mattered with my character. I could have easily justified to Micah, I merely attended a company gathering, had a few drinks. She couldn't possibly dictate my participation in a legitimate social event with colleagues. Then why? Chapter 14, You Are My New Tenant. As the evening descended after work, Feng Yuan and I found a quaint Chinese restaurant near the company. We ordered a simple meal and sat facing each other. After a moment, the dishes arrived, and Feng Yuan began eating with his chopsticks, engrossed in his own world. Seeing me not moving my chopsticks, he remarked, "Aren't you going to eat, lad? Aren't we waiting for Yin Yin?" I inquired. "She's gone to Shanghai to meet Jianwei. Tonight, it's just the two of us," Feng Yuan calmly stated. "She went to see Jianwei? You two are getting married soon. Is it all right for her to leave?" I asked, with a hint of skepticism. Feng Yuan shrugged nonchalantly. "She just left after work. She'll be back tomorrow morning. It won't delay anything," he assured. I nodded and began to eat as well. Feng Yuan put down his chopsticks and gazed at me. After a moment, he asked, "Zhao Yang, how about we have some wine tonight?" "Not tonight," I declined. After a pause, he looked at me again and said, "I sense you're feeling down. Yen Yen probably hasn't gone far yet. Shall I call her back to pick you up? You can take the opportunity to meet Jianwei since it's rare for you to be sober and meet her. I sighed in silence. Yen Yen truly follows the dog wherever it goes. What do you mean? Feng Yuan asked, changing his posture, seemingly unconcerned about my indirect insult. Both of you are unethical. Please, refrain from comforting someone who's contemplating death to the point of actually pushing them towards it. I expressed my anger. Did I comfort you? Feng Yuan innocently countered. I grew furious. Can you even eat this meal anymore? If not, just leave. My outburst made Feng Yuan sigh. He shook his head and said, You're still the same every time anything related to Jianwei is mentioned. You react faster than turning a page. Are you unable to overcome this hurdle with her? Only then did I realize that Feng Yuan's earlier remarks were just a test. But I didn't know how to respond and fell into silence again. Feng Yuan had the waiter bring 2 cans of Qingdao beer. He opened one and handed it to me, then opened another for himself. Deliberately changing the subject, he asked, How's it going with that model? She seems quite interested in you. Don't bother. At most, she's just a toy for when we're both lonely, I remarked. A sex toy, he inquired. However you interpret it, I said indifferently, taking a gulp of beer. Feng Yuan took a sip from his own can and pursued, Tell me honestly, since Jianwei left, haven't you found any other woman who moved your heart? None, I answered without hesitation. Feng Yuan shook his head. You don't seem like the sentimental type. Perhaps, it's your own unsettled heart if you calm down and think carefully. Maybe there's a woman who has stirred your heart all these years, but you just haven't realized it yet. My heart unsettled? I questioned Feng Yuan. He nodded earnestly and gestured for me to take a sip of the wine. Have a drink and contemplate. You'll surely find something. I was skeptical, but still followed Feng Yuan's advice. After a sip of wine, I let my thoughts wander, considering all the women around me over the years. After a while, I couldn't pinpoint anyone who had moved my heart. I preferred to confine my memories with them to fleeting encounters. I still remembered the mornings after those fleeting encounters. The sunlight falling on the blanket supported by our bodies didn't give me a sense of security. Often, I felt like fleeing, wanting to put on my pants and leave. It seemed that the dawn sunlight only revealed material poverty, with no trace of the excitement and ecstasy of the night. If a woman were to sit with me on the same bed one morning, discussing marriage based on the premise of a house, I would definitely collapse, and with that collapse, I would forget what it felt like to be moved. Do you have any revelations? Feng Yuan raised his beer, touching mine, showing considerable concern as he asked again. I just shook my head, took a sip of beer, and didn't bother to say another word. I had no desire to dwell on the meaningless term being moved with him any longer. Instead, I chose to continue my silence. The two finished a can of beer and continued their meal. Unnoticed, the sky outside dimmed, while the street lamps on both sides portrayed the city beneath the nightfall in a similar posture. Each lighting a cigarette, Feng Yuan and I whiled away the time after dinner, engaging in idle chatter. As we conversed, Feng Yuan glanced at the night outside and teasingly remarked, Zhao Yang, something seems off tonight. It's pitch dark outside, yet you're still sitting here. Aren't you supposed to be out enjoying yourself? Nowhere to go, I'll head home and sleep later, I replied. Feng Yuan seemed taken aback by my response. Who murdered your knight? He exclaimed. His question left me speechless. Indeed, the nights of revelry and dreamy existence had been slain by a woman who had recently entered my life. Not eager to answer Feng Yuan's question, I was instead eager for him to help me analyze a dilemma that had plagued me for days. I couldn't understand why Miai, driving a luxury car, would move into that dilapidated house. I refused to believe it was some preordained fate. Destiny seemed far-fetched, especially considering that I had thrown her blanket away a few days ago, and she subsequently left me stranded in the middle of nowhere. Such torment seemed hardly the workings of fate. After a while, I said to Feng Yuan, let me tell you something fresh. Does this fresh news have any direct connection to your abstention from going out tonight? He quipped. I nodded, then selectively disclosed to Feng Yuan the various incidents involving Miai in the house that had occurred in recent days. After hearing me out, Feng Yuan looked at me skeptically, pausing briefly before asking, Are you sure she, driving a luxury car worth hundreds of thousands, moved into your rundown house? Absolutely sure. Help me analyze, see what her motive is, I earnestly implored Feng Yuan. It definitely isn't for money or to harm you, Feng Yuan said disdainfully, giving me a side glance. I know I'm not wealthy and my life's a mess, but now I'm telling you something serious. Can you take it seriously? I urged. Zhao Yang, we live in a very realistic world. Honestly, don't expect her to be repaying some debt from a past life in this one, Feng Yuan advised. Rubbing my chin, I solemnly said, it might actually be possible. Maybe in my past life, I did so many good deeds that it's led to my downfall in this life. Perhaps my female landlord from the past owes me a favor, so she's come to repay it by serving me in this life. Serving you? Wasn't it you who said she tricked you into going to the intersection of the Shanghai-Nanjing Expressway in Suzhou and Wuxi one late night, leaving you freezing with a runny nose? Is that the kind of service you're talking about? Feng Yuan retorted. Pointing at Feng Yuan, I was momentarily speechless before saying, "You're just a terrible friend." Feng Yuan chuckled, patting my shoulder as he got up. Zhao Yang, perhaps having a woman to divert your attention from Jianwei might not be such a bad thing. Before I could respond, he added, it's almost 7:30. I have a meeting with the wedding planning company at 8. Let's call it a night for now. Watching Feng Yuan leave, I lit another cigarette in a daze, finding it difficult to understand his words. Why would Miai's appearance divert my attention from Jianwei? Leaving the restaurant, I bought another can of beer. Drinking and mingling with the bustling crowd, listening to their laughter and banter, I walked home, lost in my own thoughts. Upon returning home and opening the door, the house was shrouded in darkness. Switching on the living room light, I looked around, feeling the desolation within. My female landlord, Miai, hadn't returned yet. Feeling bored, I sat on the sofa and turned on the TV. Without the drunken revelry of nightclub escapades, the night seemed endlessly long. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt like such a homebody, seeking solace in front of the television. And feeling unbearably bored. Though it was only 8:30, the boredom gnawed at my heart. I lit a cigarette and sat idle for a while, feeling a bit morose. Suddenly, I felt a desire to die, realizing how unbearable a solitary night could be. I fetched my guitar from the room and found a sheet of music. I began to play and sing, finding solace in the melodies, one of the few things I enjoyed besides the reckless nights of debauchery. After finishing a song and preparing to play another, I finally heard some movement outside. The door opened, and there she was, Miai, with her killer beauty, carrying her handbag. Despite our disagreements, I wasn't petty. So, I refrained from belittling her beauty. This woman seemed like a masterpiece crafted by the gods in a moment of whimsy. I set down my guitar and greeted her with a smile. Back already? Miai replied curtly, heading to her room. Hold on, I said sternly, pretending to be serious, but in truth, I was just bored and didn't want to be alone, so I decided to play a little prank on her. Miai turned to face me. What is it? She asked coldly. I scrutinized Miai, growing increasingly puzzled by her extraordinary beauty. Then, without filter, I asked, why are you so beautiful? You're not some kind of demon, are you? Furrowing her brows, Miai retorted, please don't make me feel like I'm inviting danger into my home, okay? I immediately stood up, feigning excitement in my tone. Miss, are you mistaken? I moved into this house first. Your notion of inviting danger is rather inappropriate. Miai ignored my assertion of seniority, her tone still icy. If you think I'm a demon, feel free to move out any time. I won't mind. Why should I move out? This house was mine to begin with. At most, you're just a new tenant. Besides, you agreed to let me stay here, and I've kept my end of the deal by not leaving the house after work like a recluse. So, don't ever bring up moving out again, I declared, getting up from the sofa to emphasize my fervor. Am I your new tenant? Miai's tone was clearly displeased. But I paid no mind to her displeasure, stating, yes, from now on, you'll have to consider yourself a female tenant in my presence in this house. The one with seniority is the landlord. Don't you think you're being childish? Also, let me remind you, you don't need to misrepresent things. Calling me a female tenant is inappropriate because I only agreed to let you stay here for a month. Soon enough, you'll be leaving with the status of a tenant. Chapter 15, Teasing Nikai. Reclining upon the sofa, I indulged in the last wisps of smoke from my cigarette, before extinguishing it within the ashtray beside me. Glancing towards the guitar nearby, I found myself devoid of the desire to strum even a single melody. Lying back, I once again succumbed to the torment of ennui. Casting a glance towards Mikai's room, a disquieting feeling settled within me. Were it not for her imposed constraints, I would have been with Robin and the others, indulging in beer and watching a bevy of beauties on a runway. Hence, much of the current boredom was a consequence of her imposition. If she hadn't suddenly purchased this house, I wouldn't have to compromise to continue residing here, nor alter my habits. On such a night, succumbing to the torment of boredom seemed unjust. I felt it was her responsibility to alleviate this ceaseless ennui, regardless of how audacious that logic may appear to others. In my cognitive realm, boredom was indeed a fearsome specter, its genesis stemming entirely from loneliness. Who wouldn't dread loneliness if they were alive? Approaching Mikai's door, I resolved on this relatively early night to break free from the prison of solitude. Knocking, I addressed Mikai, who was occupied within. "Hello, are you available for a chat?" "We lack a common language," Mikai's voice emanated from within. "We all speak Chinese, how can we lack a common language? Besides, I am the landlord, and you are the tenant, residing under the same roof for the sake of long-term harmony. Diligent communication is imperative." Ignoring my words, Mikai's room echoed only with a slightly awkward response. Changing tactics, I adopted a conciliatory approach, once again rapping on her door and saying, "Have you had dinner? Shall I prepare a supper for us?" Unimpressed, Mikai interrupted me impatiently. "Please engage in meaningful endeavors." "Ah, providing you with a late-night snack is deemed meaningless? You mock my existence as purposeless, do you not? Very well then, I shall refrain from disturbing you any further." Remarkable. I shall amuse myself with a spoon. With a resentful air, I returned to the sofa, though unwilling to concede. Why was she entitled to such indifference? I might be impoverished and seemingly aimless, yet I refused to debase myself to accommodate her airs of superiority. Even in life's struggles, my dignity remained paramount. Indeed, I fetched a spoon from the kitchen and placed it upon the coffee table, spinning it with my fingers until it resembled a top. Half an hour later, Mikai's door creaked open. She had changed into a white coral fleece pajama set and was heading towards the bathroom, seemingly preparing for rest. I watched her intently, but she paid me no heed, glancing at the spinning spoon only when she reached the coffee table. Halting her steps, she regarded me expressionlessly, while I, in turn, continued to spin the spoon vigorously. My frivolous actions finally elicited a faint smile from Mikai, yet I couldn't discern if it was genuine amusement or thinly veiled mockery. "What are you laughing at? Did I ever mention my penchant for spoonplay?" I teased, spinning the spoon even faster. Mikai nodded, remarking, "You are indeed true to your word, showing improvement." With that said, she walked past me towards her room, saying no more. Observing her retreating figure, I halted the spinning spoon with a slap of my hand. Moments later, Mikai emerged from the bathroom. Her hair cascaded loosely, adorned with droplets of water, and though her makeup had been removed, her complexion remained fair, delicate to the touch. Her innate beauty shone through, a rarity even among the countless women I had encountered, who never retained such allure without embellishment. Continuing to disregard my presence, she made her way to her room. Once again, I mustered the audacity to call out, "Stop right there." "What is it?" Mikai's tone was icy, her expression even colder as she regarded me. Feeling a twinge of apprehension, I pressed on, I find myself rather bored. Would you accompany me for a brief chat? Find someone as boring as yourself. I'm retiring for the night." As if granted a reprieve, my voice rose a notch. "But you said so yourself." "I'll go find some entertainment outside." "You may leave, but take your belongings with you. There's no need to return. I knew you'd exploit my weak spot to entertain yourself. Honestly, after over 3 years of renting, I've encountered all sorts, but never have I met a tenant as haughty as you. Can't you show some courtesy to your landlord?" With a tinge of dissatisfaction, I once again forced the label of tenant onto Mikai. In retort, Mikai sneered, "And I've never met someone as shameless as you. If I weren't brazen, I'd be sleeping on the streets by now, all because of your coercion." Glaring at Mikai, I recalled the events of the past few days, fueling my discontent. "Aren't you the landlord? Who dares coerce you?" Mikai's gaze was sharp, her words dripping with sarcasm. Fuming, I pointed at Mikai, a pang of frustration seizing me. After a moment, I said, "You wretch. I may call myself a landlord, but is it too much to ask for a shred of dignity? Lamentably, the life of the impoverished. Ah! Devoid of happiness. Someone like you, in ancient times, would have been deemed a scoundrel. In modern times, you're just a rogue." Mikai shot me a disdainful look before turning away, refusing to engage further as she retreated to her room. As the door slammed shut, I spat in frustration. So much for bourgeois superiority. Comrade Xiaoping once said, "The Chinese people will eventually achieve common prosperity. You lot get to enjoy your premature affluence for a few years, but mark my words, in the years to come, you'll see." After a brief commotion in the living room, I returned to my own chamber, closed the door behind me, and reclined on the bed. Lighting a cigarette out of habit, my mind lingered on the verbal sparring with Mikai just moments ago. Though I hadn't gained any advantage, the memory of her vexed countenance and her accusations of my roguishness brought a clandestine satisfaction. Strangely, my mood seemed less irritable now, and before long, I drifted into a hazy slumber, finally escaping the torment of boredom, perhaps due to retiring early the previous night. I awoke at 6 in the morning. Despite my efforts, sleep eluded me thereafter, leaving me staring blankly at the ceiling, thoughts drifting towards Fan Yuan and Yin Yan's impending wedding. Anxiety gnawed me, a palpable reminder of my forthcoming encounter with Jian Wei. Regardless of how I attempted to reassure myself, tranquility remained elusive. Moreover, I pondered whether Jian Wei experienced similar apprehensions, having dedicated years of her youth to me. Yet, I lacked answers. I couldn't use myself as a benchmark to gauge her sentiments, for women often differed from men, and Jian Wei's disposition might not mirror mine. Perhaps, when we inevitably faced each other again in 3 years, she would regard me as nothing more than a casual acquaintance, or even a stranger. As dawn broke, my persistent anxiety dissuaded me from further sleep. Rising from bed, I performed a cursory ablution before preparing breakfast. Upon inspecting the refrigerator, I found several preserved eggs brought by Bandai a few days ago. Boiling a pot of congee and acquiring some fried dough sticks from a nearby breakfast joint, I deemed it a satisfactory morning repast. Venturing downstairs, I procured additional fried dough sticks from a breakfast stall and a few bags of pickled vegetables from a convenience store. Returning home, I found the water in the pot already boiling. After adding rice, I proceeded to tidy the house, a gust of cold air reminding me of the neglected windows. Indeed, both Mikai and I had forgotten to close them last night, hence the unusual chill in the morning. Autumn was already halfway through, and the morning temperature had plummeted. Hastily wrapping myself in a jacket, I closed the balcony windows. The first rays of sunlight pierced through the glass, casting a lazy glow upon the potted plants below, as if reassuring me, this was indeed a fine morning. In an effort to immerse myself in this pleasant morning, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Gradually, my restless mind found some semblance of peace. Upon reopening my eyes, I noticed Mikai emerging from her room. Still clad in pajamas, she bore the drowsy countenance of someone just roused from sleep. Leaning on the mop, I greeted her with a playful smile. "Good morning, my esteemed tenant." Seemingly unwilling to engage in the landlord-tenant banter I imposed, she pushed her disheveled hair behind her ear and asked, "Do you always rise this early?" "Of course not. Today, I rose early solely to prepare breakfast for you," I lied nonchalantly. "Is that so? Well, I was planning to sleep a while longer." "Then why are you up now?" I inquired, knowing full well she had risen to use the bathroom. Yet, I was curious how such a refined lady would express the act of urination. Would she shy away from using the direct term? Or would she embrace it? Frowning, Mikai remained silent, clearly uncomfortable. My heart swelled with satisfaction at her evident discomfort as I moved to block the entrance to the bathroom. After a moment, Mikai said tersely, "Move aside." "No way. Don't you understand basic manners? I asked you a question, and you haven't answered. You're making me very angry early in the morning." I raised my voice. Standing her ground, Mikai's cheeks flushed slightly, perhaps from anger or embarrassment. After a night of holding it in, who wouldn't feel uncomfortable? Pleased with myself, I grinned triumphantly, feeling as though Mikai had finally paid the price for seizing control of this house with her money. Then, with a hint of villainy, I continued, "Well, since you intend to go back to sleep, why are you up now?" "I'm up now because I need to use the bathroom. Please move," Mikai said, her expression now clearly displeased. Fearful that I might have pushed the joke too far and risked eviction, I quickly stepped aside, allowing Mikai to enter. Suddenly, I realized that there was no need to explicitly mention urination. Using the term "using the bathroom" was just as subtle a means of expression. This, perhaps, was the difference between a crude man like myself and a refined lady like Mikai. Once Mikai emerged from the bathroom, I extended a genuine invitation to join me for breakfast. However, she seemed disdainful of my earlier jests and ignored me, retreating to her room to continue sleeping. Thus, on what appeared to be a promising morning, I sat down to a mundane breakfast alone, then proceeded through the rest of the day like a programmed automaton. Wait, I must correct myself. Strictly speaking, I'm not quite like an automaton, for lately, my thoughts have been consumed by human emotions, leaving me anxious every time I think about Fang Yuan and Yan Yan's impending wedding, or my inevitable reunion with Jianwei after 3 years. I can't help but feel instinctual anxiety. At times like these, I wish I were just an emotionless machine, for with each passing day, I still don't know how to face Jianwei after 3 years of separation. At that moment, the morning sunlight shifted, illuminating the black coat in the wardrobe and extinguishing my emotions. Yet, Jianwei's face grew ever clearer in my mind. Chapter 16, Two Shameless Thieves. Upon arriving at the office, as usual, I first opened my computer to peruse the social news for a while, then proceeded to browse through my friends' Weibo posts, attempting to find some amusing anecdotes to brighten my mood. Unintentionally, I stumbled upon a Weibo post from 2 days prior by Yan Yan, the main content of which featured her in Fang Yuan's wedding photos. Yan Yan had tagged everyone except me in this Weibo post. Naturally, I understood her apprehension, fearing that the fruition of her relationship with Fang Yuan would evoke memories of my own dismal conclusion with Jianwei. However, she needn't have worried. I offer my heartfelt blessings, tinged with pain, to their union. Their wedding photos encompassed various themes, one of which was titled Silent Joy. In this particular set of photos, Fang Yuan and Yan Yan held hands expressionlessly, appearing silent, while in the background, a smiling sunflower accentuated the theme of silent joy. It was indeed a commendable theme, though it did not rightfully belong to them. This theme arose over 3 years ago, when Jianwei, with her forward-thinking sensibilities, consulted me on how we should capture our wedding photos. I had a sudden inspiration to propose. I believe that joy found within silence withstands the test of time and the erosion of years, enduring forever. I sighed softly, my heart aching with the relentless passage of time. After a moment of silence, I chuckled and left a comment beneath Yan Yan's Weibo post, "Two shameless thieves, may you be forever happy." Lighting a cigarette, I drew a deep breath, exhaling slowly. However, the lingering smoke was instantly dispersed by the incoming breeze, revealing a scene riddled with cracks. Within this scene, Jianwei remained as she was 3 years ago, lovingly nestled in my arms, praising the theme of silent joy I had proposed. Together, we joyously decided that one day, when we married, we would use this theme for our wedding photos. But ultimately, we never had the chance to use this theme. Instead, it was plagiarized by Fang Yuan and Yan Yan, two friends lacking in innovation. I'm not the least bit upset about it, truly. It just reminds me of the joy we once felt as we eagerly anticipated our wedding day at dusk. At noon, Fang Yuan and I dined together in the company cafeteria. Starting from this afternoon, Fang Yuan would begin his 2-week wedding leave, and he needed to temporarily delegate some work to me. After discussing work matters with Fang Yuan for 10 minutes, we shifted our conversation to his upcoming wedding with Yan Yan. I asked Fang Yuan, "Has Yan Yan found her bridesmaids?" Fang Yuan nodded, saying, "Originally, Yan Yan planned to choose a female colleague from their company as her bridesmaid, but then Jianwei returned, so she'll definitely choose Jianwei." I didn't react immediately, pausing for a moment before asking Fang Yuan, "I'm your groomsman, right? What's wrong? Are you planning to back out at the last minute?" Fang Yuan's face darkened as he asked, "What were you two thinking? Have you considered how awkward it would be for me and Jianwei if you and Yan Yan arranged it like this?" After a moment, Fang Yuan finally realized and said, "Oh, right, Yan Yan and I didn't think about that aspect. It would indeed be awkward to arrange it like this for you two. As long as you understand. Moreover, Jianwei and I have already broken up. It's inauspicious for us to serve as your groomsmen and bridesmaids," I added. Thinking about it now, I'm a bit worried. After a pause, he asked again, "So, who'll withdraw between you and Jianwei? You're going on wedding leave, and all the work is being piled onto me. I don't have much time to spare as a groomsman. It's better for me to withdraw," I pondered and said. "Alright then, there really isn't a perfect solution to this matter," Fang Yuan said with a hint of regret in his tone. Of course, I also felt regretful. But according to wedding customs, having a pair of exes serve as groomsmen and bridesmaids is rather ominous for the newlyweds. After a brief silence, I asked Fang Yuan, "Have you thought of any other candidates for groomsmen?" Fang Yuan reassured me with a comforting expression, saying, "No need to worry, we have someone readily available. We'll ask Xiang Chen." Surprisingly, Xiang Chen serving as Fang Yuan's groomsman was an ideal choice. Back when we were in college, the three of us shared the closest bond in our class. However, Xiang Chen is from Nanjing and returned there after graduation, unlike us who stayed in Suzhou. Nevertheless, the camaraderie of revolutionary youth persists. I nodded and inquired about Xiang Chen. I haven't been in touch with him for a while. What has he been up to recently? Fang Yuan sighed. Their family's tobacco and liquor business has been doing well these past 2 years. I heard they've opened several branches in Nanjing. Recently, they're planning to corporatize the business and have set up an 800 square meter flagship store. Just the design fee for the flagship store alone cost over 300,000 yuan. It's quite upscale. I echoed his sentiment. His old man is truly remarkable. Even in his old age, he managed to turn his son into a second-generation wealthy individual. Fang Yuan shrugged and said, "This matter has little to do with his old man. You know, his third uncle works in the Commerce Bureau, and he's part of the Real Power faction. Expanding their tobacco and liquor business is only a matter of time for their family." I concurred with Fang Yuan's viewpoint. In this society, having connections versus lacking them makes a world of difference. For instance, Xiang Chen and I are stark examples of this contrast. In the afternoon, Fang Yuan left the office, and my workload surged. I didn't leave until 8 p.m. The next day, even though it was Saturday, I spent the entire day working, mainly taking over Fang Yuan's responsibilities for the Gucci project at our mall. These past 2 days, I've been coordinating with the Gucci team and revising the project proposal based on their requirements. In just 2 days, I already felt overwhelmed and weary, realizing that compared to Fang Yuan, my proficiency in handling these matters was lacking. He always seems so effortlessly adept at it. Saturday night, at 9 p.m. I dragged my weary body onto the last bus home. Despite the upcoming rest day, I couldn't relax. My mind was filled with thoughts of Fang Yuan and Yin Yan's wedding tomorrow. While I was genuinely happy for their union, I was reluctant to face Jianwei in such a joyous occasion. This reluctance grew stronger with each passing moment, making Fang Yuan and Yin Yan's wedding feel like a cruel scourge and interrogation for Jianwei and me. Perhaps Jianwei wouldn't mind this interrogation, but I truly did. Upon returning home at 9:30 p.m., I didn't immediately freshen up. Instead, I sat on the sofa in the living room, lit a cigarette out of habit, and immersed myself in an unshakable state of anxiety. I even forgot to pick up my guitar to play a song and ease my mind. After drinking a glass of cold water, I lay on the sofa, staring blankly at the ceiling. After a while, I heard the sound of the door opening, knowing it was Mikai returning. She returned even later these past few days, perhaps indulging in her own nightlife, but that didn't concern me. The smell of smoke in the room made Mikai frown. She walked over to me and said, "Could you not smoke in the living room?" I didn't care about Mikai's inquiry and replied indifferently, "What's wrong with smoking in the living room? I'm not smoking in your room. Smoking in the living room is also not allowed." "I don't want to come home every day to a smoky environment," Mikai said sternly. "Fine, next time I'll open the window when I smoke. The breeze will dissipate it soon," I replied patiently in my state of anxiety. "That won't do either. From now on, you can only smoke outside." "It's not allowed in this house," she insisted. I sat up from the sofa, frowning. "Not allowed here, not allowed there. Do you think of me as your grandson? I've been living in this house for over 2 years, and I've smoked in every corner, including the room you're living in now and on the toilet seat in the bathroom." After my outburst, Mikai suddenly said calmly, "If you're so unhappy, you can find another place to live. You can smoke on the rooftop if you want. No one will bother you." I fell silent, feeling frustrated being cornered, yet unable to resist. I wished I could become wealthy and buy this house myself, then arrogantly climb onto the roof to smoke a cigarette. After a while, I crumpled the cigarette pack and angrily threw it into the trash bin, glaring at Mikai rudely. "I won't smoke anymore." "Satisfied?" Mikai looked at me calmly and asked, "Won't smoke anymore? Weren't you just saying you're my grandson?" "Rubbish. You're treating me like a grandson." "When did I say I'm your grandson?" I retorted. Mikai smiled, shrugged, then turned and walked back to her room. It took me a while to realize she had set a trap for me, subtly trying to make me admit I was her grandson without realizing it. Suddenly, I felt an urge to spray blood at her door. It was so damn unfair to bully an honest person like this. After freshening up, I returned to my room and firmly closed the door. I found a pack of cigarettes, opened it, lit one, then opened the window and lay on the bed, smoking. The phone, which had been silent for half a day without any warning, suddenly rang. I was dazed for a moment before picking up the phone from the bedside table just as the ringtone was about to end, then answered. Yan Yan's familiar voice came from the phone. Zhao Yang, are you asleep? Lying down, but not asleep yet, I replied. Yan Yan sighed, lost in thoughts again? Single men are truly pitiful. You'd better call back later. I'll go cry in the bathroom first, I said irritably. Yan Yan and Fang Yuan were cut from the same cloth, always trying to console people to death. Yan Yan chuckled. Alright, let's talk business. Go ahead, I said, taking another drag of my cigarette. I'm with Jianwei right now. She's staying at my place tonight. Yan Yan lowered her voice. I suppressed my racing heart and asked calmly, aren't you with Fang Yuan? Are you stupid? I'm obviously at my own place now, she said, then added sweetly, waiting for my husband-to-be to come and marry me tomorrow. Oh, was all I said. Do you want to say a few words to Jianwei? She's chatting with my parents in the living room. Yan Yan lowered her voice even more. I was speechless. Suddenly, another voice came from the phone. What are you doing, Yan Yan? Then came the abrupt beep of the phone hanging up. However, I didn't hang up immediately. I could tell it was Jianwei's voice. Finally, the call disconnected on its own. A while later, Yan Yan sent me a text message. You heard Jianwei's voice just now, right? It scared me. I called you behind her back. This matter needs the consent and communication of you two, the parties involved, before I can help connect you. Otherwise, it would seem quite tactless on my part. I didn't reply to the message. I just extinguished the cigarette in silence, but her voice lingered in my ears, reminding me of the joy we once shared in the rainy dusk. In fact, whether we communicated tonight had no practical significance for us. After all, we would meet face to face tomorrow with our real selves, and 3 years had passed. Did it really matter to endure another anxious night? Today, as the night wanes, I exert myself, and let us all continue to exert ourselves as well. Our writing style tends to be slow to warm up, and the beginning of a new book period is always the most vexing. Yesterday evening, we finally slowly climbed into the new book rankings, currently at the 10th spot. Flowers, collections, check-ins, and for those with economic means, all are welcome. Let's power through the most challenging phase of the new book period. Chapter 17, The Encounter 3 years later. In truth, I didn't sleep much this night. I introspect, I yearn to return to the past, to those days when she still loved me, and then we held hands in silent joy. Yet, I am living in the present, living in the silhouette of her turning away, and then bitterly yearning for her, mocking her ruthlessness. The night transitioned into morning, sunlight unknowingly seeping through the crevices of the curtains into my room, eventually settling on the vase of flowers, casting a rainbow halo, seemingly heralding another splendid morning. Yes, even without the sunlight's proclamation, it is still a splendid morning, because a newlywed couple will be united in matrimony today. I must not taint this morning and their wedding with anxious emotions. I admonish myself to maintain a sunny disposition. I retrieve the most dashing suit from the wardrobe, shave off my stubble, and style my hair with a blow dryer to look quite spirited. Smiling at myself in the mirror, ensuring I radiate sunshine, only then do I prepare to leave this room to bestow my blessings upon Fang Yuan and Yan Yan for their wedding. As noon approaches, I and a group of guests wait outside the hotel for the bridal convoy and also for Jianwei, who will accompany Yan Yan as a bridesmaid. The bridal convoy is delayed, reportedly due to traffic congestion, which is torment for me. At this moment, I would rather see Jianwei earlier. The agonizing anticipation before our meeting is precisely what is difficult to endure. Perhaps, after meeting, we will tacitly treat each other as strangers. That would be best. I squeeze out of the crowd and sit on a stone bench opposite the hotel, my emotions even more anxious. This anxiety is difficult to articulate in words, always feeling that Fang Yuan and Yan Yan's wedding, symbolizing completeness, is a severe interrogation for me. This interrogation is not only emotional but also material. Why is it that Fang Yuan and I graduated from the same school, started from the same point, yet now he has achieved both career success and marital bliss, while I am in such a dismal state, living a nomadic life, burdened with debts everywhere? Amidst self-interrogation, my heart is filled with suffocating loneliness and despair at this moment. I truly wish there were a woman by my side, to help me conceal this loneliness and despair, allowing me to wear at least a facade of happiness to bless Fang Yuan and Yan Yan. Taking out a cigarette, I finally retrieve my phone from my pocket, and then dial my tenant Nikai's number. After a short wait, Nikai answers the call. I quickly ask, have you woken up? Why? Nikai's tone is cautious. I smile, trying to relax her guard first before saying, actually, I want to invite you to dinner. No need, we're not that close. Mikai seems to reject without consideration. There is a need. Think about it, you lent me money and took me in, it's truly a great favor if I don't invite you to dinner, won't I become the scum in your eyes? I emphasize. After a brief silence, Mikai speaks again, where are we dining? At the Yamming Grand Hotel. Yamming Grand Hotel? Did I hear correctly? Mikai asks with skepticism. Of course, only a 5-star hotel can demonstrate my sincerity in inviting you to dinner. So, you must come. This meal is worth a week's wages for me. I earnestly emphasize, feigning a bit of heartache. Understood, give me 20 minutes. Pausing, she adds, and please, don't be so extravagant in the future. Sincere invitations can be made anywhere. I didn't expect Mikai to consider my financial situation. I hesitate for a moment before replying, understood. I'll wait for you outside the hotel. After that, both Mikai and I hang up, and I finally feel relieved. I think to myself, by luring Mikai to accompany me, I won't feel as lonely and destitute later. A quarter of an hour passes, and the bridal convoy has yet to arrive. It seems they have encountered an unprecedented traffic jam. However, I am no longer as anxious as before, feeling that inviting Mikai was a wise decision. Another 5 minutes pass, and I see the red Audi Q7 approaching. Mikai has indeed come as agreed, parking the car in the open-air parking lot, and I immediately walk over to greet her. Standing beside the fountain in the hotel square, I speak first. I was a bit worried you wouldn't come. Unexpectedly, you're right on time, exactly 20 minutes. I'm not like some people who take breaking promises for granted. Mikai takes the opportunity to tease me. I smile indifferently, you're referring to me. It's fine, you can be straightforward. I won't be upset. You're not upset because you have thick skin. Mikai jests again. I smile again but don't say anything more. Mikai glances at the hotel across the street and asks me, can we go for dinner now? Of course, but we have to wait a bit longer. We're still waiting for a few more people. Are there others? Mikai inquires. As her words fall, the crowd that has been waiting begins to clamor, and then 8 cars adorned with festive decorations, forming a line, enter the hotel courtyard. They've finally arrived. I'm too preoccupied to talk to Mikai beside me. My gaze is uncontrollably fixed on the car carrying the bride. I know Jianwei is also inside that car. My breathing becomes erratic in an instant. Dressed in a groom's suit, Fan Yuan steps out of the wedding car first, then goes to the other side of the car to help Yan Yan out, lifting her with a princess carry. Applause and cheers erupt from the onlookers at this embrace, brimming with happiness, momentarily engulfing me. In the ebb and flow of the crowd, I finally see Jianwei stepping out of the car. She holds a bouquet of flowers, wearing a sapphire blue dress. The noon sun casts a shimmering glow on her arms, and her face is still as beautiful as ever. Beneath her delicately arched eyebrows, her eyes sparkle like peach blossoms swaying in the breeze. Among all the women I know, her eyes are the most beautiful. Jianwei hands the flowers to Yan Yan, who is in Fan Yuan's embrace, and then joins the crowd in applause and cheers. Yet. Chapter 18, Profound Confession. The water in the fountain pool cascades down the colossal sculpture, and amidst the sound of flowing water, the peculiar trio of myself, Mikai, and Jianwei gaze at each other, none breaking the silence for a while. Finally, Jianwei smiled and said to me, long time no see, Jia Yang. I responded with just one word, fearing that saying too much would reveal my trembling voice, and dreading she would sense my fear. Upon my reply, Jianwei merely smiled again and looked at Mikai, asking, your girlfriend? Only then did I realize I was still tightly holding onto Mikai. I couldn't even bring myself to let go, thinking to myself, if Mikai were indeed my girlfriend, it would be enough proof that I had been doing okay these years after breaking up with Jianwei, at least not dying in the loneliness of being alone. Instinctively, I didn't want Jianwei to see how destitute I was. Under this instinctual drive, I unexpectedly nodded to Jianwei and said, yes, she's my girlfriend. After saying this, I nervously glanced at Mikai, afraid she would expose me on the spot, turning me into a laughingstock. Mikai furrowed her brows in silence, seeming to consider showing me some mercy, yet also unwilling to give up this excellent opportunity for revenge against me. I hastily said to Mikai, don't you have urgent matters at the company? Hurry up and go. I'll explain to my friends later, they'll understand. Mikai struggled and shook off my hand, seeming eager to leave this place, leaving without saying a word. Heading towards her car, the red Q7 passed by me with a rush of air, as if the atmosphere was filled with Mikai's angry aura. It seemed I had truly angered her. The fountain still gushed, but only Jianwei and I remained on the scene. I lit a cigarette, took a deep drag, and complained with a helpless expression, alas. She's always busy, always. Is that so? But your girlfriend looks pretty good, Jianwei remarked. What do you mean, looks pretty good? She's definitely good. I straightened up, dissatisfied with Jianwei's statement. Jianwei observed me for a while before saying, Zhao Yang, you haven't changed. What do you mean? Before Jianwei could answer, the groomsman, Xiang Chen, waved to Jianwei from a distance, saying the MC was looking for her as there was a segment of the wedding that required her cooperation. Jianwei responded with a nod to Xiang Chen, then looked at me and asked, the luncheon is about to start, aren't you going in? I'll finish my cigarette first. Watching Jianwei walk away, a sense of loss filled my heart. I wanted to confess to her, what she said was right, I haven't changed. I still long for the days we were together. I still remember that day when I couldn't meet her family and could only hide in a corner to bid her farewell. I also remember her crying, waiting heavily on the car window with lipstick. I watched from afar until the word waiting blurred in my sight, until tears streamed down my face, tears she would never see. Immersed in these memories, I even thought of rushing over to hug her regardless of everything, to confess my love to her. Yet, just now, after our long-awaited reunion, our conversation was so pale and bland, not even rising to the level of ordinary friends. I know those moments of joyful love and silence are drifting further and further away from us. If my heart were a city, at this moment, the entire city would be weeping. The wedding banquet began, and everyone took their seats in order. My colleagues and I sat slightly further back, while Jianwei, Xiang Chen, the groom, and the bride sat at the foremost table. I tried to resist looking at Jianwei, but I couldn't control myself. It's ridiculous, isn't it? For a woman I hadn't seen in 3 years, who haunted me every night, how could I suppress the urge to think of her when she was just within arm's reach? My colleagues chatted with me, but I absent-mindedly responded, always finding an excuse in my heart to glance over at Jianwei's side. Yet, throughout, Jianwei didn't even give me a response, only occasionally chatting with Xiang Chen beside her. They seemed to get along very well, and Jianwei's mood also appeared to be quite good. The MC on stage urged Fang Yuan and Yan Yan to engage in intimate interactions, and the audience below cheered. I remained silent, but drank one cup after another. In a daze, Xiang Chen approached me with a wine glass. I raised mine and drank it all in one go. By the time Xiang Chen reached me, I had already poured myself a full glass of liquor, and shouted to him, Xiang Chen, my man, come here and drink with me. Xiang Chen smiled and said, whose drinking depends on who can hold out. How many rounds are you prepared for this time? The prostration habit, which I and Xiang Chen once indulged in, originated from our university days, a relic of youthful recklessness. Whenever we drank, it was a test of endurance until one of us succumbed. Back then, the last one standing would mockingly dub the prostrate individual as grandson, and so, throughout our 4 years in college, we took turns playing this role without ever acknowledging the other two as masters. In truth, since entering society, I no longer indulge in reckless drinking as I did in my university days, but today, whether it's Xiang Chen or anyone else, as long as they raise a glass, regardless of the type or quantity of liquor, I'll accompany them. For I feel joy for Fang Yuan and Yan Yan, yet sorrow for myself. In the midst of so much emotional turmoil, perhaps alcohol is my best remedy. Pouring into a larger highball glass, I filled it nearly to the brim with white liquor. Lifting the glass, I addressed Xiang Chen, as before, 1 drink each. If you can't handle it, quickly lie down and play dead. No begging, no explanations. My words amused the crowd, provoking laughter, though they took it as mere jest. But I, without blinking, actually lifted the glass and downed a full cup of white liquor in 2 swallows, then turned it upside down to signal I was done. Amidst a chorus of admiration, everyone's attention shifted from Fang Yuan and Yan Yan to Xiang Chen and me, including Jianwei, who also glanced over. Zhao Yang, even after several years of graduation, you're still so spirited. Nevertheless, I'll definitely drink this toast, for today I am especially happy, Xiang Chen declared, then promptly emptied his glass of liquor before casting a glance towards Jianwei. I noticed this detail, and suddenly, a string in my heart was pulled taut. I understood who Xiang Chen's happiness was for. During our university days, he and I pursued Jianwei together, yet she chose me. Subsequently, he treated Jianwei like a sister, still providing her with unwavering care. Of course, back then, it seemed like closure. But now that Janwei and I have parted ways, and she has returned to her homeland, if she were still single, he could rightfully pursue her again. I remained silent, but Xiangchen, pouring another full glass of white liquor, said to me, "Zhao Yang, my young brother, do me a favor. Let's have another drink." I nodded and poured another glass of white liquor, ready to down it in one go. However, Xiangchen stopped me, saying, "This time, I'll go first." With that, Xiangchen raised his head and downed the entire glass of white liquor in one gulp, then placed the glass on the table and headed towards Janwei. With a tone of concern, Janwei reproached Xiangchen, "Drink a little less, won't you? Aren't you afraid of harming yourself by drinking so much? Through these drinks, I want to speak my heart to you." Xiangchen declared, then took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and borrowed the microphone from the MC. Watching Janwei, he immersed himself in a state of deep affection. Suddenly, I had a premonition that what was about to unfold would be enough to tear me apart. The whole room fell silent. At that moment, Xiangchen's expression was sincere, tender, yet filled with passion. He held Janwei's hand tightly, gazing at her for a long time before saying, "Today is a joyous day, and also a day I've been anticipating for a long time. Janwei, I have loved you deeply for 5 years, and my feelings have never wavered. Even when you were with Zhao Yang, I never gave up on loving you. I once thought Zhao Yang would make you happy, so I chose to silently bless your relationship. But the reality proved your love to be a failure. I won't judge your love, as love is free, and dwelling on the past is meaningless. Now that you're single again, I hope you will be my girlfriend. I am truly willing to give my all for you, even if you plan to return to the United States. I am willing to accompany you anywhere, just like I did 2 years ago when I went to the United States with you. Making you happy, bringing you joy." My heart felt as though it was being torn apart by explosions of pain. Xiangchen's words reminded me of something. It was a month after Janwei and I broke up when Xiangchen did indeed go abroad for a while. However, at that time, he didn't inform us which country he was going to. Now, I could confirm that he went to the United States to accompany Janwei after her breakup. It turns out that over the years, he had maintained contact with Janwei. Everyone waited to see if Janwei would accept Xiangchen's proposal, but at this moment, I understood completely that the Janwei from our university days loved a feeling, whereas the post-graduation Janwei loved compatibility. From whichever angle one looked, Xiangchen and Janwei were the most compatible. Perhaps I already knew what Janwei's answer to Xiangchen would be. In the midst of the tearing pain, I seemed to once again see the day I bid her farewell, when she tearfully wrote "wait" on the car window with her lipstick. Chapter 19, The City in the Sky. Janwei exchanged an incomprehensible look with Xiangchen. From his pocket, Xiangchen took out a delicately prepared gift box, which he then opened to reveal a necklace adorned with a crystal inset with diamonds. The lights in the hall dimmed, and a spotlight illuminated Xiangchen and Janwei, making them shine brightly, while I felt my presence fade into the dimness. This crystal diamond necklace was designed by the best jewelry designer in the country. It's one of a kind in the world. I've given it a name. Devotion, representing my sincerest and purest love for you. Just like diamonds and crystals, give me a chance to personally put it on for you. Will you? Xiangchen expressed. I wanted to refute Xiangchen, to tell him he was wrong. Anyone with money could gift a woman a crystal diamond necklace, but the sincerity and purity derived from love were heartfelt and didn't require any material assistance yet. How many women would believe such a pure truth? The dazzling brilliance of diamonds had long blinded them. But in the end, I didn't argue with Xiangchen. Instead, I watched as the citadel in my heart shrank smaller and smaller. Everyone present was moved by Xiangchen's gesture, applauding and encouraging Janwei to accept his confession. Janwei glanced towards the dark corner, then finally nodded in silence. The applause and cheers grew even louder. Excitedly, Xiangchen placed the necklace around Janwei's neck. In that moment, a couple found love at Fang Yuan and Yin Yin's wedding, adding joy upon joy. At this moment, except for me, no one remembered the dusk in the rain when we agreed to take wedding photos with the theme Joy in Silence. As the wedding banquet reached its climax amidst the excitement of the crowd, guests bid farewell to each other. I staggered out of the hotel alone. The sunlight outside the hotel was splendid, so bright it made it hard for me to open my eyes. Leaning against a pillar, I squinted, gazing at the blue sky and white clouds. In my drunken days, I seemed to see the citadel in my heart soaring into the sky, merging with the blue sky and white clouds, gradually becoming crystal clear, devoid of any loneliness or pain. Yin Yin and Fang Yuan, both in wedding attire, supported my swaying figure from either side. With a hint of apology, Yan Yan said to me, "Zhao Yang, we truly didn't know in advance that Shangchen would confess to Janwei at our wedding. You must be feeling terrible." "I'm sorry." "Ha ha. I'm not sad, why would I be?" "Oh right, did you? Did you see the city in my heart flying into the sky, sparkling and transparent in the sunlight?" I slurred, then took the transparent film from the cigarette pack and covered my eyes, searching for that city in the sky. Yan Yan and Fan Yuan exchanged glances. Fan Yuan removed the film from my hand and said, "Stop talking nonsense. I'll have the driver take you home. No need for the trouble. I can go back by myself. I'll take a taxi," I said, shaking off Yan Yan and Fan Yuan's hands and walking towards the street. As I stumbled along, I saw Janwei supporting the intoxicated Shangchen from the other side. She walked him towards a black Land Rover, took out the car keys from his pocket, and opened the door. Yan Yan and Fan Yuan hurried over to help Janwei get Shangchen into the car. Actually, watching this scene didn't make me sad at all. At least I could still stand with difficulty, while Shangchen was already unconscious from intoxication. This time, it was him who collapsed. He was the grandson, and I was the master, a master tormented by loneliness and pain. I stood still, watching as Janwei started the car and drove off with Shangchen towards the bustling city. This afternoon, I sat by the green belt beside the moat, smoking one cigarette after another until there were no more. I closed my eyes and lay down, feeling the autumn afternoon breeze brushing past me. Despite drinking excessively, the extreme pain in my heart prevented me from falling asleep. Instead, the agony was amplified several times over in the unusual clarity of intoxication. The memories of her writing weighed on the car window in the past, juxtaposed with her silent acceptance of Shangchen's confession today, alternated in my mind, flashing faster and faster, as if to tear me apart. I held my head tightly in pain, curled up and sobbed. The pain in my heart became increasingly unbearable. I truly wished to end my own life, to follow that city that had detached from my heart, transformed into the city in the sky with the last of my strength. I pulled out my phone from my pocket, found the most recent call record, and dialed immediately. After a long wait, the call was answered, and I heard Mikai's resolute voice. She said to me, "This time, no matter what excuse you use, I won't tolerate it anymore. Today, you must move out. I don't want a liar living in my house." I chuckled, then calmly said to Mikai, "If you're free now, hurry over to the moat." My seemingly nonsensical request made Mikai even angrier. In a heavy tone, she asked, "Why should I go?" "Quick, come and stop me, I'm really going to jump into the river." I didn't wait for Mikai's response, I raised my hand and threw the phone into the moat. I wasn't lying to Mikai, driven by alcohol and pain, I became numb and really wanted to pursue that translucent city in the sky. A warm breeze, accompanied by a pleasant fragrance, wafted into my nostrils before I could take a step. The accumulated alcohol suddenly surged up. I glanced at the dizzying blue sky, then my body went limp, collapsing to the ground in a drunken stupor. When I woke up, it was already dark. The street lamps on both sides of the moat were lit, reflecting on the rippling water surface. The sound of car horns occasionally echoed from the road beside the bank. Under the dual stimulation of visual and auditory senses, the blurry world suddenly became real. My head throbbed painfully as I gazed blankly at the sky, where stars twinkled in competition. A comfortable fragrance of a woman drifted into my nostrils with the autumn night breeze. I turned my head and saw that it was Mikai sitting beside me, her coat draped over me. I sat up from the ground, and Mikai noticed that I was awake. "You're awake. Why are you here?" We almost spoke simultaneously. Another gust of night wind blew, causing the yellowed maple leaves to fall, drifting into the nearby river, where they floated along with the starlight. Both of us stared at the water's surface. After a moment, Mikai answered my question, "I came to see if you were dead or not." "What do you mean by dead?" I asked in confusion, having already forgotten about calling Mikai before falling asleep. "So you're deceiving me again, huh? I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about." I sighed. Mikai patiently said to me, "You called me at noon and said you wanted to jump into the river. If you have any doubts, you can check your phone's call records." "Then let me see." I began searching my pockets. "Ha! Where's my phone?" Looking back at the water's surface, I finally remembered that I had impulsively thrown my phone into the moat. With the memory came the recollection of indeed calling Mikai like a lunatic at noon, saying I wanted to jump into the moat. Feeling a bit guilty, I said to Mikai, sorry, I drank too much at noon, it was just drunken talk, I really wasn't deceiving you. Scumbag, unprincipled liar. Mikai cursed mercilessly. Don't curse at me like that, okay? Pausing for a moment, I added, it's just jumping into the river, right? I'll make up for it now, isn't it better late than never? You can jump if you want. Mikai looked at the water's surface and said to me. Then I'll jump. I said, walking towards the riverbank and leaping onto the railing.